Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Political Pigpen. As you can see, this is episode 11. We will be debating foreign policy. Most of us here are economically more on the right. We don't have any leftists on this stream currently. I really don't think that is really important. Generally, on the show, we like to represent a variety of different opinions, ranging from left and right. But since this is specifically a foreign policy debate, it's really just more of interventionism versus non-interventionism. So whichever side doesn't really matter. So libertarians here versus hawks, more or less. We have some new people on the stream. Pretty much everyone except my unofficial co-host, Alcazar. You're basically my unofficial co-host right now.
Yeah.
My unofficial co-host, Alcazar, who everybody, I'm sure, already knows at this point. Yeah, so anyway, we're going to go around. Everyone's going to introduce themselves. Let's start with you, McCarthyist, Machiavellian, Imperialist. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Am I supposed to introduce myself here in my views?
Indeed you are.
Okay, so I am a major in I major in international relations at a certain accredited university in the United States, coupled with economics, and I consider myself to be, well, imperialist, but in a realistical sense, in the Mearsheimerist sort of sense, and very disillusioned with the anti-war sentiment with the realist academia recently. There's that, and I am in support of covert actions all across globally, and I am also in support of certain preemptive wars in the name of the Thucydides trap that Thucydides, the classical realist, has put forth. Yeah, there you have it.
All right. And what about you, Stratton Davis? This is your first time on.
Was that me?
Yes, that is you.
Okay. My name is Stratton Davis. I'm a writer. I'm used to be interventionist myself. Became very anti-war in the last 1.5 to 2 years. I would identify, I guess, myself as a paleo libertarian. That's about it. No, I wouldn't call myself a Hoppian. I'm more in the Lou Rockwell tradition.
Okay. Fair enough. And Alka Cringe, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine. Just had a bit of a rough night today.
Yeah, I heard about that. You said something about a car accident?
Yeah, I may or may not have rear-ended someone.
Well, in what sense did you rear-end that person?
I fucking crashed my car. What do you expect?
It was a gay joke. Sorry. All right. Anyway, Kevin, and then our special guest tonight, for the very first time, finally, we've been trying to bring him on for a while, Kevin Castley. How are you doing this evening, Kevin? He's the arch neocon of Twitter, very infamous.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me on the program, The Politicrat. It's good to be here. I am Kevin Castley. I'm the host of Superpower Broadcasting. We are the preeminent independent neoconservative YouTube channel out there. We're taking on the world. I myself am a liberal neoconservative with offensive realist characteristics. That's basically the most succinct descriptor that I could use here. I am obviously an advocate of preemptive action. In fact, I go so far as to view all preemptive wars, is, at least in the extent to which I advocate, namely against Iran and North Korea, as defensive, because the war is inevitable. So in that context, better to do it on your terms now when they're weak and we're relatively strong than wait for it to be on their terms later when they have thousands of nuclear weapons. And at best, we have parity, if not inferiority to them. So that is my approach. And you can check me out over on Twitter. I'm at Kevin Castley, and you can also follow my YouTube channel, Superpower Broadcasting. I do daily live streams. So,
well, you live stream every day?
That's correct. Yes.
Oh God.
Yeah, we had the Patreon gang. Once we hit $60 a month, I said, yeah, well, we'll do daily live streams. We're almost at $100 a month. Once we hit that mark, I'm going to be doing the daily pre-recorded videos in the morning, in addition to the daily live stream. So, and I also
is it?
oh, yep.
Oh, I was asking if this is your primary source of income.
Oh, no, nowhere near currently. It
Okay.
counts at the moment in full disclosure for between 3 and 5% of my total income currently. But we're going to change that. We're just getting started. I've only been doing this for a year and a half, which means I've got another 48 and a half years or until the world is globalized under American hegemony. So.
Okay.
But I'm not going to stop then. I'm not going to stop then. I'll still do the streams. They just won't be as important. They'll just be an opportunity to dunk on all the aggressive gremlins and the brainlet brigades and the anti-interventionist isococks.
That was a dig at Shoe on Head, right?
That was a dig at Kremlin Kyle. It was a dig at Neckbeard Jimmy. It was a dig at Bimbo Kim. It was a dig at Tanky Tulsi. It was a dig, of course, at Bootlicker Ben. That's Ben Norton. And of course,
at first I was thinking it was at Ben Shapiro. I was like, I'm pretty sure he's a neocon.
well, he's not a neocon. He's not a neocon. I like Ben Shapiro. I really liked Ben Shapiro. I was going to conclude by just mentioning because Machiavellian imperialist had mentioned his educational background. I have a degree in economics and a degree in political science. So that's
okay,
my
yeah, same. I assumed, I'm just gonna ask one more question. I assume, like, in terms of economics, you're Chicago school?
Somewhat. I'm more in line with, when it comes to foreign policy and everything, Jean Kirkpatrick's school of thought, which does go in line with the Chicago school, but I don't call myself a neoliberal, not even in the 1980s sense of the term, though there's a big improvement there over today's neolibs who
they're just more time.
They spend more time, and I'm not kidding here, man. I know, we all know, they spend more time and effort waging a war on the American suburbs than they do devoted to changing the regime in Iran. So
I disagree with the Iran regime change part, but I do 100% agree with the warring on the suburbs.
No, wait, but the suburbs are bad though.
To describe my economic views, that's one of the only areas of my political line of thinking that's really substantially changed in the last 5 or 6 years. I'm more protectionist now than I used to be. These days, I see free trade as something that should be earned and should be relegated to only the most loyal allies, obviously Israel, Saudi Arabia, United Kingdom, Canada, America. We should all have free trade. Everybody else, if you're not going to play ball, if you're not going to make strides in order to come around to our side of things, then free trade is it's basically playing patty cakes with those that are going to take you to the dry cleaners, like as communist China has done. So I consider myself a liberal, and I generally am for a free market on a domestic level, but I'm for national security trumping corporate interests internationally.
So I'll say one more thing. I want to say that policy-wise, that kind of reminds me of like someone like Tom Cotton.
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
So yeah, just the protectionism aspect mixed with the hawkishness, because he directly comes from the neoconservative tradition.
Yeah, I'll say this: a little protectionism never hurt anyone, and if we as neoconservatives want to start taking back the world from the era of cringe and usher in the neoconservative renaissance, we can't just completely write off people like Tucker and people like Trump what they have to say, because on economics they often have quite a few good points. So
what do you think of?
Wow.
Wait, on that note. Hold on a second, guys. Hold on. We need to get to Puma real quick, and then we will start our fucking pig fight.
Hey,
how are you doing this evening,
I'm
Puma?
Puma. I'm doing great. I'm a geology student, and you may say that makes me completely unqualified to talk about this. And you are right.
Dude, I mean, it's fine. I'm a first semester college student.
Puma, are you? What do you like in terms of your foreign policy views? Where would you align yourself?
I am hawkish. I'm not 100% sure if neolib is the right term for it, but I do. I'm hawkish in foreign policy. For example,
like a center right hawk kind of.
I don't know, fence sitter centrist. Just put me there until I figure it out. Got a fence post up my ass. But yeah, for example, I'm not necessarily in favor of war in every single situation. For example, with North Korea, I don't think we could be able to successfully pull off an invasion without disastrous consequences for the South Korean people. But I don't think that also necessarily means that we need to immediately seek out a solution that directly favors a country like North Korea. There has to be other ways to go about doing it. Now, because I have dedicated an insane amount of time of thinking about those solutions, I can't tell you what they are.
Okay, well, anyway, on that note, after that very long introduction of all of us, welcome to the Political Pigpen. I've been really excited for this episode. Been trying to plan it for a while. Unfortunately, we had a couple people who had to drop out last minute, but I think it'll go pretty well. We might actually have another anti-war type-ish person join here in a little bit, but that remains to be seen. But in the meantime, I actually wanted to start this discussion by talking about realism versus realism versus internationalism, and whether or not, or which one is more effective, and which one is more or less a better modus operandi in regards to conducting foreign policy as a philosophical viewpoint. Because I know that internationalism is often a very misunderstood word. People use it and conflate it with globalism. And then neoconservative is a very, very, very abused word as well. I personally I'm not a fan of neoconservatism as an ideology, but a lot of people seem to just use it as a placeholder for just any kind of hawkishness and seem to completely reject it, or they refuse to not refuse, but for some reason they don't do research, and they see it is a very specific school of conservative thought that falls under the internationalist bracket, but it comes more from people like Crystal back in the 70s, and to a lesser extent people like James Burnham. And then what I really dislike personally is when people use people like Shoe on Head, when she's like the neocons and the neolibs, and she's like neolib equals left neocon. Neocon equals right neolib. It's like
that's almost the right definition of neoliberalism. You see, neoliberalism is a thing that I don't like, and the less I like it, the more neoliberalism it becomes.
Good thing good, bad thing bad. That's June's worldview in a nutshell.
Yeah. I as a neoliberal, I stand for bad things and I stand against good things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. and you love the global poor.
I love the global poor, dude. Free trade all the way, baby.
I know this is kind of an inside joke between Alkazai and I, but Alkazai, imagine loving unions.
Imagine loving, dude, screw the unions. Honestly.
Wait, are we being ironic right now? Because I'm opposed to unionism. So
no, we're being ironic. We're not being ironic. We're kind of being serious.
Well, I have less of a problem with private sector unions, but public sector unions can get GTFO.
Mm-hmm. Private sector unions are very destructive.
Hold on. If it's public sector, at least you could say it's the taxpayers and we can vote and everything over that. If it's private sector, it's literally an infringement on property rights.
I thought this debate was about foreign policy.
This debate is about foreign policy.
We'll leave that for another stream then.
Yeah, no, I'll be more than happy to have you guys back on for that one, because I was planning on doing one about it.
All I will say about unions is it becomes a lot better to understand that they arguably operate under the same premise that a business does.
No, I think it's a form of corporation. Their business is just the business of hypothetically representing the workers of a specific industry.
Maximizing profits of the workers, basically.
They like to pretend that they are not special interest groups when they are most certainly special interest groups. Well, especially if you read Public Choice. But anyway, we're not gonna be talking about unions. So whatever. This time around, let's go back to internationalism versus.
Let's talk about bombing Middle Eastern children.
Okay, actually, let's start there. Iraq War. Everybody's positions on the Iraq War. Personally, I think it was a bad idea. McCarthyist, go.
Well, my views on this topic has changed over time, but my overall view is that I used to be very pro-Iraq War. Now I am more neutral on it. The reason, and probably anti to an extent, the reason is that in general, there are three types of actors in world politics: U.S.-aligned states, Soviet/China aligned states, and nationalist states. Generally, the best idea is to foreign aid and trade with U.S.-aligned states, really good diplomacy, sanction and invade and regime change Soviet or China-aligned regimes, and diplomatically detente with nationalist states. Now, how you define nationalists or non-aligned states is very complicated, but an example of this would be India. India is very non-aligned, but that does not. But antagonizing India would be a terrible idea because that would only turn India towards China or Russia. Turkey is another example of this, and one could easily argue for either case. And Saddam Hussein's Iraq can be also be in this category as well. So, point being that Saddam Hussein and also Egypt under El-Sisi, but Saddam Hussein could most potentially have been a buffer zone against Iran, and invading was definitely costly. It would have been better off to invade Iran instead, which would have been much better. And the fact that the invasion of Iraq did not accomplish the intended goal that it was supposed to, which is oil, that was also not very good. Also, for the United States, it's better to have a US-backed dictator than a democracy run by people that do not like the United States.
I can actually agree with that.
Why would you?
That's why. No, that's why I think that the whole Chile
Exactly.
back in '73.
Chile was good.
That was good. That was one of the best foreign policy decisions of the 20th century.
I definitely agree. Democratization is a bad policy if the people want to democratically elect leaders that will turn the regime against the United States and for Russia and China. Therefore, my view on the Iraq was very complex. It should have been done, if I were to go back, it should have been done where Saddam Hussein were replaced by a Sunni-backed or Sunni, pro-Sunni, anti-Iran dictator. That would have been much better. That is my stance.
Okay. And in the meantime, we have a new guest here, Grayson. He's more of a anti-war. He's relatively anti-war. He's right of center. Not quite a libertarian. But what would you consider yourself, Grayson? Just at least in terms of foreign policy and your general position on the issue. Just what you'd label yourself with regards to international relations.
I would not say I'm an isolationist, but I would definitely say I'm sort of protectionist and non-interventionist, sort of like Harding Coolidge views, almost.
So maybe like a paleocon?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, Stratty, Iraq War. You're a libertarian, so I am going to take a wild guess and assume that you're very anti-Iraq War.
I am. I will say, like, logistically, I kind of do like what McCarthyist Machiavellian had to say. I logistically, that makes a lot of sense. I think, however, well, obviously, I'm against preemptive wars. When it comes to how the U.S. should take on wars, I do believe we need to go back to the Constitution and have it be voted on by Congress. Whereas with Iraq, the war powers were given away from Congress to Bush in that sense. I disagree with that from that point of view, but the justification that I think we went into Iraq on was just weak. I think it was based on lies. I don't think it really helped any of our citizens here. And I think if we're going to launch any kind of preemptive war, it should be done to protect American interest in the sense of they'll help out American citizens. The American interest that we were aiming to help with this preemptive war, more sense helped out elites such as Cheney or the Bushes. And I'm very against that. even though I'm not someone who, ideally even wants to help any kind of American interest. If we are going to help any, I would like it to be ones that support the citizens' interest. Going from there, though, I mean, there's not much I can add to it that you won't hear from any other libertarian or paleoconservative or paleo libertarian. I will say this, in like the last 5 years, because my opinions have changed on the Iraq War specifically quite a lot. And I used to be one of those people that believed that America was there trying to make these people go, take a more liberal line with their lifestyle and society.
So you're basically,
you're
basically a normie con.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess you could say that. Just, try to push down them a culture that embraces things like gay marriage or equality for women and such like that. And I think those are good things. But if a society wants to get rid of that or not have any of that, that's their business. I don't see why we from 3,000 miles away should try and change that. That's one of the views I've taken on it in the last 5 years. And that one, I don't really know if anyone here would take that view for why they support the war. I just added that on because I think that's ridiculous. Again, another ridiculous reason to justify being at war in Iraq or anywhere.
Yeah, like, I mean, for instance, I personally believe that Afghanistan, in theory, was justifiable. I mean, I think we could have handled it way differently, and I don't think that we need. I kind of debate whether or not I feel like we should be there now, because there's the Belt and Road Initiative, which actually might be a justifiable precedent for staying. But with regards to the initial reasons for going into Afghanistan, I would have 100% voted yes. But Iraq is a completely different story. And in hindsight, I feel like it would have been much better for stability in the region had we not overthrown Saddam Hussein. Because the thing is, he and Assad hated each other's guts. And with taking Saddam out, that led to the creation of a weaker Iraq. And that resulted in more or less, I don't want to say the term power vacuum, but it definitely reduced the balance of power in the region. And that allowed for Assad to accumulate more influence in the region. And then the blowback from the Iraq invasion of Iraq also led to the bolstering of the Islamic State, many leaders of which were formerly working as ministers under Saddam Hussein. So that's why I personally think that in hindsight it was a mistake. I understand why people would have supported going in at the time for moral reasons, but I just think the Iraq specifically was a mess. But that does not mean I am 100% against intervention in all cases if I feel like it is justifiable. I just don't think that it was justifiable in that particular reason. But in response to me, McCarthyist, and Mr. Davis over there, Kevin, what would you have to say?
Wait, hold on. Can I give my opinion on the Iraq War?
Okay, let's actually, Alcazar, yeah, you just give your quick one, and then we'll let Kevin go.
The Iraq War was justified, but I wouldn't have gone through with the war because it withdrew resources from fighting the war in Afghanistan.
It's an interesting opinion. It's an interesting take. I've never heard that one before, actually. But
well, now you have.
How would you respond to that, Castley? All the
okay. Yeah. So my internet cut out very temporarily at the moment when you were going over the prompt. Is the prompt simply my view on the Iraq War, or what are you asking specifically here?
No, I was at what your general opinion on the Iraq War, because I know you are still in hindsight very pro Iraq. So I just wanted to ask your reasons for that being so, and why in hindsight you think that it was generally a good idea.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity to give my opinion here, because I know that there are going to be people that disagree with this. But
yeah, many of my viewers generally tend to lean more towards the libertarian side of things. I have some non-interventionist NRX people following me too. But generally, yeah. But generally, they are very, very anti-neocon. So and I think that this would actually be a good opportunity for them to be able to see what your position on the issue, on this issue is. So
okay, so there are a couple points to this. The first is the reasonings for the Iraq War initially in 2003. The second point that I'm going to get to here is addressing the criticism that it created a power vacuum. And the third point that I have is how I would have done it better. Just to begin, I am a supporter of the war, and I'm going to argue here that it's been 17 years since the Iraq War commenced in early 2003 under the leadership of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. And here's basically the deal, right? It's been 17 years. And if at that moment, 17 years ago, you said, I'm wary of the war, I'm kind of cautious about it, I'm not sure 100% if I trust the evidence that they're presenting and all this kind of stuff, and Colin Powell and all these guys, I would say, okay, I disagree with you, but I understand there's a lot of fog. We don't have all the details. It's a very hectic time right now, shortly after 9/11. I can understand why some people were against it in 2003. Today in 2020, with 17 years of hindsight, understanding in full clarity the absolute scourge and grotesqueness of the Saddam regime, the security threat that they posed, their nuclear ambitions, their chemical weapons program, etc. To me, it is just completely undeniable and irrefutable today that the Iraq War was necessary. I mean, it's just, it's been 17 years. Like I said, in the chaos and the confusion back then, you make an argument out of an abundance of caution. Maybe it's not the best thing and whatnot. These days, now, when we have access to, the spotlight has been shown on history, it is very clear that it was the right choice. And George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were lions. And I'm going to lay out, and I'm going to borrow here from the very eloquent Christopher Hitchens, who laid out 4 conditions under which a state forfeits their sovereignty. The first is that he laid out: if it participates in regular aggressions against neighboring states or occupying of their territory. Saddam Hussein, the irony here is that he actually did 2 wars for oil. A lot of people say, oh, Bush lied and people died. He did wars for oil. Actually, Saddam did 2 wars for oil. If Bush wanted cheap oil, he would have made a cozy deal with Saddam. Saddam was begging for one. He was desperate not to be invaded. He would have given the oil potentially even at a loss. So it wasn't about that. It wasn't about that. However, Saddam, he did 2 wars for oil. He invaded Iran in 1980 and he invaded Kuwait in the early 90s. And the thing is, both of those were officially under the pretext of oil and glory and territory. So the projection, of course, is that George W. Bush was about that. The reality is Saddam Hussein was about that. Second point that Christopher Hitchens lays out. 2, if it violates the letter and spirit of the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Saddam actually, as a matter of fact, was pursuing nuclear weapons. And it was not, if it was not for the actions of the state of Israel to destroy the Osirak reactor and his nuclear ambitions in the 1980s, he would have eventually acquired nuclear weapons. And yet a lot of the opponents of the Iraq War tend to not be fans of Israel. And they will often say, well, Saddam didn't have nukes. Yeah, he didn't have nukes because of Israel. So let's give Israel some credit there. Third point, if it should violate the Geneva Convention, Saddam obviously has done so. Saddam actually used weapons of mass destruction. Further, it's not just that he possessed weapons of mass destruction. I know a lot of people will say, well, did he have the WMDs or not? It's worse. It would be one thing if he possessed WMDs, which he did, chemical weapons, in prohibition of treaties on that. It's actually worse than that. He used them. It's a million times worse. It's a difference between possessing an illegal gun and using an illegal gun to murder like 50 kids in a school. They're both illegal, but one is a hell of a lot worse. Saddam did both. Look up the Halabja massacre if you haven't done so yet. He actually used chemical weapons against his own people. And the fourth is, if it plays host...
Wait, hold on. Let me stop you there for a second. Which event are you referring to for Saddam using chemical weapons? Are you referring to the Alan Fall campaign back in 91?
That's correct. Yes,
okay.
And it killed somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people as a result of chemical weapons, which is a complete violation of international treaties. There's a prohibition on chemical weapons. Even the possession of it is incredibly dubious, but using it against civilians is unacceptable. So if you're saying we're okay with that, then there's no standards or anything anymore. You're basically saying it's a free-for-all. And I want to go on to the fourth point that Mr. Hitchens lays out. He says, if it plays host to international gangsters, terrorists and jihadists, which of course Saddam did. There's a common misconception that people such as Donald Trump put out there that Saddam kills terrorists, and while it's true that some of the people that he did execute were affiliated with Iranian sponsored terrorism, he also participated in aid with terrorists going back to Zarqawi, Al Qaeda, and the predecessors to those organizations and everything. And so he was an absolute menace. And apart from that, we shouldn't overlook the state terrorism that he conducted. He actually fired scuds at Israel, which is our top ally, if you're the West, top ally in the region. And so those are the 4 points there why the war was absolutely justified. He was a national security threat. He was a humanitarian crisis. He was, not to mention, he was buying all these weapons. Where do you get the chemical weapons from? Where did he get the nuclear materials from? He got it from France and the Soviet Union. Chemical weapons were a bit of both. He bought a lot of stuff from the Soviet Union. The French actually sold a lot of the yellow cake and everything over there. And it was the Mossad that had to blow up a cargo vessel at the port of Marseille. Some allies, the French are anyway. That's a different point. But I do want to talk, though, about the second point now is, well, there's this issue that's out there.
Let's actually hold off just for a second, so we can give Puma and Grayson time to speak. Actually, let's start with Puma and then Grayson, because I don't think Grayson has said anything.
Yeah, while all you guys were talking, I wrote some stuff down, so I actually remember what I'm talking about. All right. So, with regards to the Iraq War, I'm in favor of the principle of it, of going to war in Iraq, but what the execution left leaves a lot to be desired. There's really dumb shit like that has never been done. And obviously, civilian casualties could have certainly been more minimized, even though it's not nearly as high as studies like Lancet suggest. One of the things that has come out of the Iraq War, though, is that Iraq now has what can be called a somewhat functioning democracy, though Iran has a lot of say in whether or not that stays the case. The Iraq War was not for oil. Iraq has kept its oil and it sells it to whom it chooses. And let's see. Saddam was a jerk, and by jerk I mean a genocidal maniac. So him being removed from power is justification enough. I don't think WMDs were a solid enough justification, and I don't think it should have been primary justification, because primary justification should have been Saddam is a genocidal maniac. As regards to Al-Qazi's point, the U.S. is more than capable of multitasking. Actually, that's exactly what we did, and we were more than capable of multitasking, doing Iraq and Afghanistan at the same time. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And there's only one more thing I want to point out. With regards to people who say that we shouldn't interfere with stuff that happens outside of our borders, I heavily disagree, mainly because I don't think one's human rights stop mattering the moment you leave the U.S. If you're being genocided in Bosnia, it's still bad, even if it's outside the United States border. And as is supposed to be the paragon of human rights, we are obligated to intervene on behalf of those who are being genocided, gassed, whatever bad fate be becoming them from government. I may phrase that terribly, but I think you guys got the gist of it.
Okay. And finally, Grayson, I don't know. Have you said anything yet? I forget.
I did my intro.
Okay. Well, anyway. That's right. You said you're Paleocom light, basically center right. So basically, I assume you and Kevin probably agree on trade, but disagree on just about everything else. What are your thoughts on the Iraq War, especially as somebody who is a foreigner?
Well, I was technically only a few months old when it started, so it just seemed like it was sort of a shady thing altogether when it was WMDs, but how many other nations in the past have been accused of WMDs? And when you consider the fact that, let's just mention the whole thing about that we had to put resources into Afghanistan, into Iraq, where back at home we have people that are suffering in places like Detroit and in Chicagoland and in New York City, where gangs are taking over the streets, and we're putting our military resources into third world countries that are very expensive to maintain, and that we are simply. And when we went into Iraq, it was simply just chaos, and it still is chaos. They couldn't even enforce their speeding laws, and so the execution was just poor, and the justification just does not seem like a real reason to go in my opinion.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Alcazar.
So, I'm not asking.
Oh, no, Puma. Go ahead, Puma. I'm sorry. I should know
No
Alcazar's voice at this point.
But when I said the U.S. is capable of multitasking, I do mean that we can multitask not only between two wars, but we can also multitask on domestic issues. I think not only is it dumb to think that we can't, but it's dumb when people who are actually in decision-making and policy-making positions think that the U.S. is incapable of both working on the domestic side of issues as well as focusing on the national event. Now, this is
So with that, is that your critic? That sounds to me like sort of like a veiled criticism of the whole "Make America Great Again."
Yeah, it is.
That Trump was going, yeah, back in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, geopolitics and politics as a whole doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. There are situations where it is, but that doesn't mean it has to be in every single case.
Make a response. We do have limited resources, though. The U.S. on average collects $3 trillion in taxes. We right now spend $4 trillion. That gives us a deficit of $1 trillion. We have to realize that there are some cuts that just have to be made if we don't want to go down the road to economic depression. That is.
All right. See, this is a part where I'm a leftist because I'm actually in favor of raising taxes to make up for that. And I'll hit one last.
Just cut taxes. Okay, if you want to balance the budget, just
we need to remember. I was about to say. Well, I was about to kind of make
programs, not the military. The military is not going anywhere. The military budget will stay or increase.
The military is 3%. It's less than 3% of U.S. GDP. It's $700 billion.
It should be 20%.
No, but then also we know
you guys are acting like military spending is like half of the economy or whatever. That's ludicrous. It's a tiny fraction.
What we also need to remember, gentlemen, is that I think a lot of times. So I'm sort of going to. So again, I am not for the amount of government spending that we currently have, but I do think that it is egregious. You have to have people like Jimmy Dore who will say, "Oh, 40% of taxpayer dollars are going towards." Or 40% of spending of our budget is going towards the military. Well, that's not true. That's only 40% of discretionary spending.
Yeah,
that's why we'll agree. Socialists are stupid when it comes to
discretionary spending. Is not the biggest part of like all of the spending. So I still think it should be reduced, but I do think it is egregious when people make that argument. And actually,
the military spending should be reduced. Would you like to have parity with Russia and China instead of superiority?
No. But
all right.
No, but I just think that there are other ways to do it. I'm more of a diplomacy first and then like type person. Right. I don't think we should. I don't think we should just like all go in guns blazing. I think that, for example,
the military is
going in and just like using force as a first attempt in order to solve problems in that sort of situation is the best way to commit national suicide.
Listen,
wait.
Okay, so
I had a point.
Let me talk.
Okay, hold on. Give Puma a chance first.
So part of the reason why I brought up the whole multitasking thing is that people like Kyle Kulinski will say, well, the U.S. spent $6 trillion on the Iraq War and the War on Terror. But what Kyle apparently refused to recognize is that $6 trillion over the cost of nearing 20 years now isn't that big of a number when compared to federal spending as a whole. And while I am talking and nobody's interrupting, I do want to get a brief response to Kevin. More money does not necessarily guarantee a better military. There are ways we can be way more efficient with our military spending. To my recollection, and I might be wrong here, it costs ridiculously high to use ammo, like not the actual gun on a railgun, but for the ammo for the railgun is ridiculously to the point that you wonder why it would be that expensive. It can be a lot cheaper, and that would be a lot better for our military if we had better regulation on our military industry.
Right. So let me address the claim here by Politicrat, like just for a second. Okay, so you said you're more of a pro-diplomacy person, and therefore use that as a justification to decrease military spending. You have to realize that the fact that the United States has such a great military and the highest military spending in the world is the reason that we can exercise coercive diplomacy. It is the reason that other countries listen to U.S. demands. That is
not
why.
necessarily against I'm not necessarily against coercive diplomacy.
Right, but the thing is, like, if we decrease our military size, that decreases our leverage. A lot of people, for example, don't realize that American troops presence in Europe is not for human rights or for what they call a altruistic purposes. It definitely is not.
I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree on what Kevin is saying here.
Okay. It definitely is not an altruistic motive. The point is that it's a leverage, it's an economic leverage, and not only that, also American troops presence in Iraq, probably the only good product of the Iraq War. American troops presence in Iraq is a reason that we can use it to leverage our government powers in order to stabilize oil prices, stabilize the oil prices all across the international market. The reason why the international community was on board with attacking Saddam Hussein multilaterally in the Gulf War was that Saddam Hussein was trying to nationalize the oil industry and also attacking Kuwait in an attempt to target its oil reserves. Therefore, military presence is actually a price stabilizer. Decreasing that would only get rid of our leverage and bargaining powers. Is why Kenneth Schultz tends to talk about the democratic peace theory, democratic credibility theory, but that's a whole nother issue.
Well, if we can get back to the Iraq War, I just want to be clear about something. There's this argument that it created a power vacuum. I want to be clear about something. I'm a neocon. I support John McCain, George W. Bush back in the day. Let's be clear. The power vacuum emerged and ISIS sprouted up in Iraq after Obama came in and pulled out. Iraq 2008 was a success. They had free and fair elections. Saddam was removed. They were an allied party to America at that point. They weren't firing rockets at Israel. They weren't invading their neighbors. The Iraq War was an overwhelming and complete success. And the neolibs, cheerleader Obama went and bungled it and pulled out. And I want to get back to this point about
you don't think Obama was a hawk?
Wait, are we being ironic or?
No, I'm being dead serious.
How was he a hawk? He pulled out of Iraq. He literally had a policy. He literally had a policy, man. He literally had a policy on North Korea that he called, in his own words, this sounds like an Onion article, he called it strategic patience, or as I call it, strategic procrastination. He let North Korea go from a few crude fission-based bombs to now upwards of 60, and very close, if not already possessing capability, just untested, of fusion-based devices and the long-range capacity to deliver a hydrogen bomb on New York and Washington within 40 minutes. That's Obama's doing. This guy's a hawk. Are we serious?
So Kevin, I agree that Obama wasn't a hawk, but definitely he had. His policy towards North Korea wasn't the best, but it wasn't good, but it was at least better than what everyone else did. Trump was a détenter. He tried to meet up with Kim Jong-un, concede away military exercises in Guam. Terrible. Bill Clinton, and I'll talk about Bill Clinton later. George W. Bush, he did the I believe the six-party talk.
That's correct.
Terrible, garbage.
I agree.
They conceded away. I believe it was the light water reactor. giving North Korea more resources to develop the nuclear program. Terrible, garbage. He should have went to war like he did in Iraq, but didn't. That was garbage. Now Bill Clinton had the worst policy towards North Korea.
Yep.
He was the one who conceded away. And by the way, he had the opportunity to strategically and preemptively strike Yongbyon, which is their only nuclear reactor at the time, the only nuclear facility. They decided not to do it. Not to do it and pursue diplomacy once more. Obama, on the other hand, he did not go to war, but strategic patience was the idea that we will not talk with you until you dismantle your nuclear program. So, in terms of the pecking order here, the best option is to go to war or preempt a strike. The second best option is to not do anything, and the worst thing to do is to talk with them and to concede resources. That is the worst thing. It's sort of like why the Iran deal is worse than not making the deal at all. That is what I think about it.
Really?
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I just want to be clear, just to follow up on that, though. I want to be clear on something. I believe that North Korea, and I did a debate against Dylan Burns recently. You can go and check that out, where we debated what should be done about North Korea. I believe that North Korea is such a grave threat and an existential threat that even though Obama was better than Bush and better than Clinton on North Korea, at least Bush had the excuse of Iraq and Afghanistan that he was focused on. Obama didn't have that. He pulled out. But I do want to be clear about something. Even though Obama was better than the two, as McCarthy has points out there, it was nowhere near good enough, and I'm still incredibly critical of it. So that's just my stance. So
the time to be able to successfully stage an invasion into North Korea passed like 2 decades ago.
Wrong.
Yeah,
That's absolutely wrong.
They have nukes now, and it doesn't need to be aimed at us to cause disaster.
We also need to remember that the purpose of nuclear weapons are more defensive as opposed to offensive. Two countries with nuclear weapons have never gone to war with each other.
Yeah,
that's not true. That's not true. The Soviet Union and China did a skirmish back in the 60s. You can look it up. It wasn't a
I know that after the Russo-Chinese split. What I forget, it was 63, I think. But Sino-Soviet split. That's right. But that wasn't really that wasn't an actual war. It was just
a skirmish.
Like it wasn't a full-scale war.
Wait, but
the thing is, nuclear weapon. The whole point of nuclear weapons, especially these days, is to be a deterrent.
Yeah. Wait, but do you believe, like, I've done the Oprah meme before where it's like Oprah saying, you get a nuke, everybody gets nukes. Are you like one of those realists who believes that if every country in the world has nuclear weapons, that we'll have like
Kenneth Waltz? Yeah, Kenneth Waltz.
Because that's insane. Yeah. The United States should have only ever.
I don't think anyone's advocating for that.
People don't realize that is actually an anti-realist perspective.
No,
it's realism.
It's a defensive realist perspective.
It is okay. It is technically defensive realists, but defensive realists are the most idealistic and perhaps the most oxymoronic term. A lot of the things that they advocate for, like cooperation with adversaries when it's a zero-sum game, it's absolutely astonishing how non-interventionist and anti-war these quote-unquote defensive realists are, given how actually idealistic they are and how delusional they are when it comes to international realities.
Yeah.
The fact that so the international system is a zero-sum game only when it's adversarial. It is actually not a zero-sum game when we're free trading with allies. Now, these realists have developed this term called relative gains in an argument against free trade. The idea that there's a security externality when we trade with an adversarial state because they can use their surplus in order to develop their new militaries and run over the trading partner. Okay, so if they believe that the international system is, well, anarchic and also very zero-sum, then it doesn't make any sense for them to pursue détente with nation states that are quite frankly zero-sum and concede away territories. How is that realistic? What is realism? That's idealism.
Stratty, I think you have something to say?
I'm listening to them for now. I'll wait. I'll let them
I do have a thing to
make
about.
Go ahead, Grayson.
When it comes to these wars, we should there does come a case where intervention does become necessary, but we should really make that a broad term and not make it so open to like any possibility. Like we should like say there's a incident that causes many people to be displaced.
Yeah, it's
Then if there,
it's a case by case basis issue. It's not like a one size fits all.
like
And I
it's like
feel
if
like
Mexico does like a horrible criminal acts that like send 2 million Mexicans across the border and then gangs start coming, yada yada yada. Then yeah, I think intervention into Mexico does work in that instance.
Annex Mexico. That's my position. Totally not just a hot take. Ugh. All right.
Alcazar, aren't you a big Mexico stan?
No, well, for one, I want to say something in the North Korean thing. I don't want to go to war with North Korea if they're especially close.
Yeah,
allies
I
with
really
China.
don't. I personally don't see any practical reason why we
'cause the
should,
thing
at
is-
least at this
Wait.
moment, go into North Korea. It
I
just seems
can't. I couldn't hear what you were saying there, Alcazar. Your mic was completely sporadic. Can you repeat that, please?
I don't want to go to war with North Korea, especially when they have a warm relationship or at least somewhat of an allyship with China.
Okay,
China
okay. So I'm just gonna say the thing is,
China's not going to get nuked to defend North Korea. That's not something.
yeah.
That's
The
this
thing is, this is
anymore.
the best.
We
Alcazar,
dropped
this is the best.
50
Alcazar, this is the best way to describe North Korea's relationship with China. Think of the world as a family, and they're all at Thanksgiving dinner. North Korea is the uncle that everybody fucking hates, and China is the one member of the family who feels sorry for them and just tolerates their presence, and so is not a dick to them.
No,
That-
well, the
that's-
thing is,
Tolerate
no,
that's
that's
their buffer
not
zone.
even more the case. Because I don't think China is going to willingly accept the fact that, obviously, if we invade North Korea, we're going to either we're going to absorb it into the South Korean government, right? And then China's not going to want to have a U.S. friendly ally on their border. Like they're
Hey,
using North
let
Korea.
me. Okay,
They're not
so-
gonna. They're not gonna do it. I'm serious. You really, honestly think that we drop 80 to 160 warheads on North Korea and then invade? That
We're not
communist
gonna nuke
China's
North
gonna go
Korea.
in?
Okay,
Then
so I'll.
they're gonna nuke us.
They're
You,
not-
Hold on.
want to
Okay,
take
hold on.
that game? You want to take that
Okay.
game? You want to accept them as a status quo nuclear power? That's ridiculous. That's
Respect-
ridiculous.
Okay,
We should nuke the shit out of them.
One does not indicate the other. I'm just saying all out war with North Korea is not a good thing when China has an active interest in not wanting a U.S. ally on their border.
Oh,
Especially
okay.
since this point
They're
might
not going.
be
Yeah.
important to this claim that the South Korean government right now under the Prime Minister Moon, I think,
Yeah, he's Tulsi Gabbard. He's Korean
he
Tulsi.
hasn't exactly been the most. He hasn't been gun blazing for North Korea. So unless you get South Korea's government back on
Okay,
board,
so-
there's gonna
okay,
be
so-
no-
Okay, I'm an expert on Northeast Asian security, so I'll have a say here. First of all, the idea that we should use China in order to coerce North Korea is absolutely laughable and
Yeah.
utopian. That is like saying that we should use Russia in order to make Belarus on the U.S. side.
Yes.
That is like saying that we should use the Soviet Union to regime change in Iran. Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds?
Yes.
Also, just okay, and also just to address some of the comments with Socrates saying that it's actually anti-Korean thing to do to nuke North Korea. Okay, first of all, no, and here. Okay, so this is here. Okay, so first of all, we don't need permission. To address Grayson, we do not need permission. Our military is there. We have complete command over the military, by the way. That was the case since the Korean War. The US military had full control over the South Korean military. If they don't want it, too bad. We're going to declare martial law, and they're going to do as American government says. That's what imperialists are saying that America is doing. So that is exactly what the case is. The United States has control. Second, and therefore we do not need permission. And second of all, the people of South Korea, I will admit, hate American presence. And by the way, the Iraqi people also hate American presence. But does that fucking matter? It's better for the United States, and it's also better for the people of South Korea.
I'm pretty
Okay, let me continue on. So they can destroy Seoul/Tokyo right now. Who made that happen in the first place? Who made that happen? Okay, the people that made it happen, and possible for North Korea to have nuclear weapons are the leftist government that took power after they democratically overthrew the dictator of South Korea that was backed by the United States. That was Chun Doo-hwan and Park Chung-hee. They had an economic prosperity going on, and the communist North Korean spies overthrew him through a popular demonstration, and therefore, and by the way, they have been accusing these dictatorships of human rights violations and all these U.S. war crimes. Who cares about war crimes? What matters more is getting rid of North Korea off the map. And the people of South Korea wanted the United States out of the Korean Peninsula because of these anti-war sentiment, because of the anti-US sentiment. We have a leftist government in power. We have an administration that seeks to concede away territories, seeks to concede away everything that they have. And you honestly believe, by the way, you honestly believe that we can use China in order to coerce North Korea? That is, okay, by the way, what is even more agitating about this is that realists are advocating for this. Realists. That's a realist thing to do. That is an idealist thing to do, first of all. That is not a realist thing to do.
Well,
Yeah,
I wasn't even suggesting we be friendly with China. I'm just saying if China is in a position where they just don't really give a shit about the plight of North Korea.
No, but they
fine.
do.
I'm fine with preemptively invading North Korea. I'm not even against it in principle. I'm just saying, right, China does not want a U.S.-friendly ally on their border, and I think they will do something to prevent a U.S. ally.
What are they going to do about it? What are they going to do?
Then what are they going to do about it? Because the U.S. is fully capable of doing the same thing to them that they would do to North Korea. Like the U.S. drafted up a plan back.
Okay. By the way, I see argument everywhere. Okay. By the way, given the chance that China can make Mexico a China-backed dictatorship, would China do it? Yes or no? Answer me. Yes, right? But what kind of an argument would America will not like us if we make Mexico into a China-backed dictatorship? That's the fucking garbage argument. Listen to let's literally like, okay, why would you give any consideration of what the enemy thinks of what we're doing? We want the enemy to think that it's a bad thing. We want them to cower. That is the whole point of geopolitics. Your argument is that, oh, they're not going to like a US-backed regime in their neighbor. Of course they don't. But what does that matter?
They're the enemy.
Does that matter?
I think you're trying to
they're the enemy. I don't care about their feelings. Look, okay, national security doesn't care about your feelings. Here's the deal. I want to just I want to bolster what Machiavellian imperialist was saying here, because I want to make it very clear so that people understand this. Communist China, I know people have suggested, well, why don't we try working with them as if we haven't in the past? That they've signed on to sanctions and then skirted past them anyway. But even if you said, okay, let's give it another chance with them, I want people to understand something. Communist China, they're not going to go into a nuclear war to defend North Korea, but they're also not going to help us with the diplomatic route, because at the end of the day, if North Korea had to pick, or I should say China, if they had to pick between having American troops on their border and a unified free North Korea and South Korea as one, or this this terrifying belligerent state that they can't really control and they don't really get along with, and was an ally of the Soviets against them during the Cold War and is more favorable to the Russians than them, but is a buffer against the West.
Are they still more favorable to the Russians now?
Yeah, I know, but who would China rather have? Would they rather have an unpredictable wild card that at the end of the day is still more sympathetic to them than the West? Or would they rather have just the West there? Well, at that point, that's like saying, would you rather have a chance at dying or dying? They know that they don't want U.S. troops on their border. They're going to keep propping up North Korea, even though they know that North Korea is unreliable, and they don't really like North Korea that much, but they see it as
the drunk uncle that they tolerate.
It's a better status quo. They're not going to get nuked to defend North Korea. So I
think you're kind of ignoring the one time in history where they did the exact same thing in 1951.
Yeah, and
okay,
it isn't
okay.
the 50s anymore. North Korea and China
Yeah.
have been belligerent towards each other for decades in the wake of the Cold War. They were brothers back then. They were comrades. These days, not so much. Literally, Kim Jong-un lost 2 submarines a few years ago, radios up Beijing and says, can you help us find them? And Beijing's like, dude, you pulled your diplomats from the embassy. You find them yourself. They are not very close allies. Now, China puts up with them because they're a buffer against America. They're not going to get nukes to protect North Korea. That's ludicrous.
I mean, China literally was just coming out of a civil war when they defended North Korea. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be so.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with this entire sentiment. North Korea also has nukes. China also has nukes. To use nukes on China in a war against North Korea is suicide for the U.S. And for
In
China
addition,
and for North Korea.
if you nuke North Korea, like North Korea is just such a small fucking country. And the thing is, a nuclear strike on North Korea is going to environmentally affect China as well. Wait!
But you think a nuclear strike on New
security.
York is going to environmentally affect America?
North Korea
I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
No. The size of the country doesn't goddamn matter. If I tell you,
Kevin, I'm talking about the fallout. It could go into Chinese territory.
It can go into Japan.
They're the enemy. Good, they're the enemy.
Good, exactly.
Those are not our enemies. Those are our allies. Do we want them to have radiation poisoning because we thought the only way to deal with North Korea was by nuking them?
They would rather have a nuclear winter than
also forgetting.
All happens either way.
What we are also forgetting is that North Korea isn't going to attack us if we don't attack them, at least not with nuclear weapons. The reason why North Korea got nuclear weapons is because they're trying to use it to preserve their regime. Do I think that's good? No. But ultimately, the losing scenario for a war against North Korea isn't New York City getting nuked. It isn't even Los Angeles getting nuked. It's Seoul getting nuked. It's South Korea getting nuked.
Exactly. But here's the thing.
No. You don't understand North Korea, man. I've been following North Korea for about 14 years now, and here's the deal. They are not just interested in protecting their regime. That's a part of it, and I'm telling you right now, and I talk about this on my channel all the time, I don't think that their plan necessarily is they're planning to get a bunch of nukes and nuke America. But let me finish. Here's the deal. North Korea, what do they want? They want to reunify the peninsula. How are they going to do it? They're going to build up enough nukes, whatever the number is. Let's just say it's 1,000, 1,200. They're going to get that. They're going to have the means to deliver it to America. And then they're going to tell the Americans, we're going into the South and you're not going to honor the terms of your security agreement. You're going to let us take the South. America would rather throw 30,000 of their troops in South Korea to the wolves and let them become POWs than lose all their cities to protect South Korea. South Korea is doomed. So I hear you that they're not just immediately going to nuke America, but you don't realize the consequences that when that happens, America is going to go from a superpower to this isolated country that has no influence because now the Europeans realize that America
let me add here.
anything in the
face. Let me add on to this point here. Okay, so first of all, you Kevin, don't deny that. He actually didn't deny, but Puma, yes, you are right. North Korea developed nuclear weapons for the sake of security, for the sake of regime sustainability, and the offensive realist. But here's the thing, Kevin's also right. They also want expansionism. That is what the offensive realist theory teaches IR students. That the whole point is that the best way to secure national security is to expand. That is the whole reason why. So it is not saying that North Korea got nuclear weapons for national security reasons is not necessarily an argument, or deterrence is not an argument against neoconservatism. Now, second of all, you said Seoul will get nuke. Okay, first of all, that is why we have THAAD, which, by the way, the Korean people did not like for some reason. They did not want the anti-nuclear missile placed in this.
More bad.
Absolutely garbage. Yeah, absolute garbage. And second of all, yes, I know that is not perfect. I know that. But here's another thing, right? You have to think of it in the long term. That's another thing, right? What are they going to do, right? If they develop enough nuclear weapons for it to actually blackmail the United States into withdrawing the U.S. troops.
Yes.
What are you going to do after that?
Okay. Here's the
There's
problem.
nothing you can do. And second,
They've already gotten to that point where they can blackmail.
No, they're nowhere near. They need about 1,200 nuclear weapons with a credible delivery capability. They're not there yet. They're not there yet.
One.
Exactly.
And they're never going
No,
to be
that's not
nailed
true.
because that.
But they only need one. You're telling me that the second a country gets a crude fission device of 20 kilotons, you can't invade them anymore?
No.
You could easily win a war with it. Like, let's say that Iran had 2 nuclear weapons. You're telling me that America can't win that war? That's insane. America could wipe them off the map. And then what? They fired 2 weapons.
I don't think we should sacrifice, in the case of Iran, I don't think we should sacrifice Tel Aviv at the altar of invading Iran.
Wait, you're going to let Iran?
We have THAAD, we have intelligence agencies,
THAAD
which may pinpoint to where nuclear weapons are, and THAAD. So even if we don't take out their nuclear, by the way, we can also mobilize more troops into the Korean Peninsula, like we did before the Iraq War, which is we bolstered the crap out of the Gulf states. Yep. We can do exactly that, so that the anti-war people can't complain if North Korea decides to nuke our bases. Now American blood's in their hand. They can't oppose this war. Now we're going to go in, regime change, and it's over.
When I can trust our missile defense system, which I do think they're going to improve to the point where we can say confidently that we can invade North Korea without getting nuked.
And by then they'll have 10,000 nukes, so it won't matter, because by then they'll have so many nukes that even if yours 90% instead of 40% like it is now, they're going to have such an overwhelming number that even more will get through. Right now, North Korea, most 3 of them are getting through.
I have a lot more.
And you have victory.
I have a lot more trust in our ability for our technology to progress faster than they'll be able to produce nuclear weapons.
Then you're wrong. You should look up the Soviet growth
Out
rates.
of curiosity, Puma, what is your rationale for suggesting that?
Well, I'm just going off what I just read a few days ago about the anti-ballistic missile test that went successfully. But that's just a baseless thing for the most part. So if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, and then we lose all of our cities. So that's kind of a big thing to be wrong about.
By your logic, we're losing all of our cities anyway. Because
that's not true. North Korea only has 60 nukes. We do a first strike against them, hit most of their targets right before they're even able to launch. That most, a few are going to get through. Some of those will get shot down. I would be surprised if even 2 nukes detonated against Western targets right now if there was a war with North Korea. If we wait until they have 1,200 or 1,800 and anything goes wrong at any point for the rest of history for all time, really, we're going to trust that regime for eternity, that at any day, forever, they can blackmail us or destroy us? Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Do you realistically see North Korea ever getting 1,200 nukes?
They're already working on it. They're already
You said 60. They produced 60 since they first started developing.
I'm just going to address,
and almost all of those were produced in the last 3 years.
I'm just going to address Socrates, who pointed out, quote unquote, Cassie thinks NK has resources to pump out nukes like the SU. Okay, who is giving them the resources to develop these nuclear weapons anyway? Who do you think they are? Even worse. South Korea and the United States. Do you know how? By the way, they developed nuclear weapons because we're pursuing diplomacy and talking and concessions. That is how they're actually. Here's how the North Korean model survives. All right.
Oh, did we lose you?
He's choppy.
Okay.
Okay. On that note, maybe I kind of want to shift our conversation to discuss the sort of the relationship between us and the 2 other major empires on the world stage right now: Russia, monarchist Russia, as I call them, and
internet got cut out. Okay, so the people tend to rely on government rations for survival as a whole point. And now that is why they developed nuclear weapons as a blackmailing device. They use nuclear weapons in order to get concessions, get foreign aid, by the way. So the ones that are funding people, they're preventing the people from starving in North Korea, is the South Korean government, the idiotic South Korean government that they are. the leftist ones at least, and the United States that made it happen. By the way, this allows them to focus all their resources into developing these nuclear weapons and developing bargaining chips anyways. What do you think is the alternative to not regime change in North Korea? What do you think? Diplomacy and concessions? What is that going to lead to?
Nope.
More nuclear weapons.
Nukes.
What do you think that is going to lead to?
1,200 nukes, right?
More nukes. Exactly. What is the alternative to what is the alternative then? Give us an alternative besides diplomacy, because diplomacy is fucking garbage.
Yes,
Give us
even
an alternative to
Dylan Burns,
diplomacy.
even Dylan Burns admitted in my debate with him that I did a couple of weeks ago, where I argued we should nuke North Korea, and he argued that we should just talk with them still. He actually admitted that 30 years of diplomacy has failed, and you know what his response was? He said, "But that doesn't mean you don't keep on trying." And I'm like, this isn't school. This isn't like you failed the test, so you keep trying for the midterm. This is, you've just admitted that we bungled it for 30 years against them.
What is the alternative to diplomacy?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again is
Not
insanity.
advocating for a diplomatic only option. I'm saying
I
it's
think we
impossible
can-
to directly invade North Korea for the time being until we develop sufficient anti-ballistic missile technology.
But
could always
you're
do
missing
a,
my point, Puma. Would you rather have the current technology with a 40% success rate where you're trying to shoot down 3 nukes that they get through, or would you rather wait until down the road when they have 1,200 and you've got a 95% success rate, but they're going to have
If you're going to do regime change on North Korea, you might as well nuke their nuclear facilities so that they can't nuke. By the way, North Korea would rather nuke each other than just going down in a ground invasion. Do you really think they're not going to use nuclear weapons if we win against them in the invasion?
Even if that works, that would turn the whole world against us. Just for the sake of optics, that is a terrible strategy.
I don't think
a realist. Okay, you don't call yourself a realist if you're talking about optics. Okay, don't call yourself a real. That's a liberalist argument. First of all, China's already going to hate us. Russia already hates us. They're not going to hate us even more. They already hate us. That's not going to change. Europe is not going to say "fuck you" to America. They're gonna keep asking for our military. They're not going anywhere.
With allies like the Europeans, with the exception of the UK, who the hell needs enemies? That's what I gotta say.
Can I make a point
how do you think the Europeans are going to respond? How do you think the Europeans? Okay, no, listen. How do you think the Europeans are going to respond? How are they going to sanction us?
They're gonna be concerned, bro. The EU is concerned, bro. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna say
the best thing they're gonna do. Literally, the best thing they're gonna. The only thing they're gonna do. The only thing they're gonna do is come up to the General Assembly, say nuking them was bad, and that's it. What are they gonna do? Nothing.
They're feckless. But they'll accept the new status quo because we're lions and they're pigeons. So.
By the way, what's so funny about this is that realists like you, politicrat. By the way. No ad hominem, but realists like you hate the UN, shit on the UN, and now they're going to the UN and saying this is so bad for optics.
No, I don't know. The thing is, I don't hate the UN. I don't hate the UN. I'm just indifferent to the UN because it doesn't do anything anyway. So I just
realists are idealistic when they feel they pretend to be realists when it looks so that they themselves look quote unquote based. They're not realistic at all. They're just sheeps. They're just idealistic as hell. And then they start making this same kind of argument that it's bad for optics. Since when do realists care about optics? Isn't that supposed to? Again, that's why realists are fakers.
Optics isn't the best word. It is bad for long-term strategy because a good strategy also involves us looking good as well. That is part of the strategy.
Only power speaks. Power speaks, not words. Power speaks. That is the realism argument.
Word
means nothing. Only military capabilities. That's the only thing that matters in international politics.
Can I make a point?
And that is what realists think, but they don't.
Well, that's a good thing I'm not a realist, then.
Okay, yeah,
I'm not a realist either. None of these arguments appeal to me. I'm not a realist.
Can we make? Can I make an argument? Finally,
go ahead.
Sure. They said we need a plan that apparently isn't diplomacy or isn't war. Well, what if we go back to the big stick diplomacy where we make sure North Korea knows that we are going to kill them if they mess up, and maybe we actually do.
Yeah, actually, no. I want to add on to Grayson's point. That's why I don't necessarily buy this idea that North Korea is going to blackmail us. Why?
because that's suicide.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
They
it is.
already
We're
blackmail us.
weak. They're strong. They know it. They know we're
They already
Exactly.
blackmail us.
They're weak. We're strong. That's why it's
No,
suicide.
they're strong. We're weak. That's what I'm talking
What
about.
if you want to do? You just need to maybe if you want to, test the waters a little bit. Maybe just blow up a ship in North Korea and then question them on what they're going to do about it. Are they really going to invade the U.S.? And then that's how we prove to ourselves that we are strong enough without necessarily going
Okay.
to war.
When did I ever
And then what?
invade America? They're not going to invade America. The point is they want to take the South. They want to blackmail America to let them do it.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, when they do that and that happens, America is done as a superpower because now all the countries in Europe realize, oh crap, America won't have our back if you do nuclear blackmail. Let's call up Putin so that he doesn't invade us.
Nope.
America will go from having the world to nothing if that
But
happens.
don't fall for nuclear blackmail. Always make yourself the stronger one of the two.
No, okay, here's the thing. I think we can all agree that the North Korean regime wants to continue being in power, right?
I'd assume so. I'd hope that
Now-
that is what they would want.
Yeah. How are they going to go about doing
Not
that?
because I like them, but I'm just saying because if they're like normal people, that's what they would want.
Okay, because how are they going to go about doing that if they're a smoldering pile of ash? Because if they enact their policy of trying to blackmail the U.S. and then decide to nuke a place and follow through on it,
They won't
they're going
nuke
to die. It's mutually assured destruction. Yeah, they
No,
will.
no, no, no. You misunderstand what nuclear blackmail means. Nuclear blackmail doesn't mean you fire all your nukes. It means you tell America, look, we're taking the South. If you fight back and you stand with the South, then we nuke you. They're betting on America not defending them because they know that even if John Bolton's president at that point, John Bolton's going to say, hey, man, look, if I was in charge
That's
20 years ago,
scary
I would have
prospect.
taken them out. But I'm not going to lose all of our cities to save Seoul, which was a lost cause anyway. And then the North
Exactly.
will go into the South, the North will go into the South, and before any
Nah,
arguments
that's not
about
what's gonna be right now.
arguments about the South is stronger. No, let me tell you, once the South finds out America has thrown them to the wolves, they will have such a morale deflation. They will surrender within 48 hours, and then Korea will turn red, and the
But can
forces of darkness will take over Eurasia, and America will be rendered to a lonely, isolated, irrelevant
Here's
power.
Can I make a
And then,
point?
and then
about-
Alexander,
here's a compromise.
wins.
that
Here's a
point?
compromise.
You-
Okay,
you-
here's a compromise.
you-
Okay.
you- Okay.
Here's a
you
compromise. Okay, I'll go first. Here's a compromise, right? If you, by the way, a lot of the anti-war wants the United States to get off. Neocons want to nuke them, right? Here's a compromise, right? If you don't, if you're so concerned about Seoul, then let South Korea have nuclear weapons. That's it. It's either that or nuke them. If you don't want South Korea to have nukes, nuke North Korea. If you don't, then let them have nukes and withdraw. That's all you want. Are you
Well,
willing
okay.
to let South Korea get nuclear weapons?
Okay, well, here's what the point I was going to make. First of all, the U.S. being isolationist, I'm a paleocon, so that actually sounds like a dream to me. Pick up your argument, but more importantly,
I would not go that far. Personally, I believe in empire, but I believe in restrained empire. So
I was just joking about that point, but paleocon. But it's like more importantly, you're trying to make the argument that South Korea is somehow not capable of defending itself. It is far more technologically ahead
Not
of
without
most.
nukes.
They
Not
have no
without nukes.
morale, though. They have
Not
weak leaders.
without nukes. Do you really think that that's the argument that anti-wars make? South Korea can defend itself not without nukes. Do you really think it stands a chance with a country with nukes that can carpet bomb the country? Do you really think that? You're the reason that South Korea, by the way, the United States is the reason that it can't defend itself. You're not letting them have nuclear weapons. If you let them have nuclear weapons, yes, your argument will make sense that it can defend itself. But until then, that is not true at
Okay,
all.
then let South Korea have nukes, and then we don't need to be there, because then South Korea would be fully capable of preventing North Korea from invading them.
Well, I disagree with that. No, but that's better than this alternative. That's better. I disagree. I think America should be the only country in the world, ideally, that has nukes.
I agree. I agree. Nuking them is still better, but I mean that's a suitable compromise to this discussion. I believe
It
that
still
letting
all relies on the idea that the U.S. will simply back out of.
But
South
they
Korea.
will.
Do
You think
they will?
America's
I
going to
don't
lose
think they
every
will.
city to defend South Korea? Because
That's
we're talking
exactly.
we're not talking about right now. I want to be
Do you
clear. I
think-
want to be clear here, Puma. I want to be clear here. We're not talking about next year. We're talking about 10 or 15 years down
I
the
know,
road.
I'm aware
And
of
North
that.
Korea has
Do you
20
think-
times as many nukes and 20
Do
times as
I'm
many
well aware.
ICBMs,
No,
and they're more
Kevin.
accurate. You honestly think that America, even with a somewhat hawkish leader, which might be kind of unlikely, but even so, you really think John Bolton? I like John Bolton a lot, and he would have done something, but right now. But you think in 20 years or something, when they pull off this blackmail, you really think that the American president is going to sacrifice 150 million Americans to save South Korea?
You're talking to someone who already, Kevin. You're talking to someone who already thinks they can blackmail us. So saying they can blackmail us in 10 years doesn't mean a lot to me. The fact of the matter.
Wait. So then you understand the end game. So let's nuke them now before that happens.
No, because I think nuking them now will only guarantee that we get nuked. Like I said, we should.
What? Who's going to nuke America? Who's going to nuke America?
North Korea.
What?
They already have missiles that can, at the very least, reach Guam and Hawaii.
So you're worried about a few nukes instead of 1,200? That's insane, man.
But the difference between a few
people live in those
eventually just stops mattering.
And they'll live in them in 12 years, 20 years.
One nuke is enough to be a complete disaster.
That's wrong. That's wrong. You think nukes are all the same, man? You think one nuke is the same? No, that's crazy. Their nukes right now are low yield. Just wait until they get hydrogen bombs, man. You know the difference between a fission-based device with 20 kilotons and a hydrogen-based device with 25 megatons? You know the difference? Because it's about 1,200
The
tons.
standard Minuteman missile is around 330 kilotons. Now, let me check this first.
No, the max that they've ever tested was 225 kilotons. Would you rather wait for them to get 2.25 megatons and have dozens of
those? They can't build its road, but somehow going to build a hydrogen bomb in 10 years. Yeah,
they all have one potentially.
Guys, hold on a second.
Okay,
what are
I
you
think
saying,
at this
Corky?
point, there's like it's getting super repetitive with like one person saying we should nuke, and then that is. But anyways,
I was about to say let's move on. There's something. I want to discuss
I think a good compromise is either let South Korea have nukes or nuke them first. That's it. That's the compromise. Period. But yes,
I agree. We should move on.
Yes. Okay. So I want to talk about right now. The three major world empires right now. United States, aka Imperium Mundi. We have fascist China, and we have the new Russian monarchy.
Wait, China's communist.
Yeah, they're communist.
They might as well be
but the thing is, they're communist. They're communist ideologically, but they're more or less fascist in practice in terms of their policies. Because the thing is, communism and socialism always become fascist by necessity.
Wait,
well,
what?
I mean,
are you like far left? That sounds like something.
No. I'm using the Hayekian argument.
No. Yeah,
I actually agree.
I want to say something
I actually
about that.
agree that.
But,
I mean,
but
communism is when. Okay, communism is when workers own the means of production. It's not when government owns the means of production. I actually agree.
Okay, here's the thing.
Because communism is impossible to achieve, and therefore
communist China
is
anarchist. Communism. They're building communism. They are a socialist state en route to communism, just like the Soviet Union. That's their end goal.
I don't agree that China is communist, but China is
communist.
Yes,
I think it is communist on principle, fascist in practice.
What you
I mean, that's like saying that. That's like saying that North Korea.
Guys, okay.
North
this
Korea
is irrelevant. This is completely irrelevant to the discussion.
This is semantics.
This is irrelevant to the discussion. We're talking about foreign policy, geopolitics here. So, with regards to the United States, Russia, and China, we also need to remember that. Okay, so let's start with Russia for a second. I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but let's start by talking about Russia. We've seen, especially in the media, particularly since Donald Trump was elected, you have all this fear mongering, particularly in the legacy media on the more center left end, talking about, oh yeah, Putin put Trump into power, blah blah blah. I'm not saying that Russia is not a threat, because they most certainly do not have the United States' best interest in mind. However, we also need to consider that that the Russian Federation is not the USSR in the 1950s. And I feel like a lot of people in the media are making it sound like it is, when in reality, Russia has been an empire in decline since at least the early 70s.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I feel like a lot of people do not understand. Because the thing is, in a sense, so I do not like Putin. I do not support Putin. But from a long-term perspective, I would rather see a successive line of more Vladimir Putins than I would like to see a weak leader to rise up after Putin, or for just the oligarchs to seize power after Putin dies. Because if that happens, then we see Russia become the world's first failed nuclear state.
What?
And that, frankly, is a terrifying prospect for me.
Wait, Politicrat, I got to ask you a question, though, about that. Would you rather the Putin system fail and we move into balkanized Russia, or would you rather Russia continue on with a strong leader that's aiming thousands of nukes at us and completely undermining our social fabric and pitting us against each other for decades?
Well, I think we should start undermining their social fabric more.
Good, I agree.
But I think we could do it through ways that don't involve going in guns blazing. I think we need to undermine their intelligentsia. We need to basically go active measures.
Start another.
What do you mean by undermine? We already do undermine their intelligentsia. What other alternatives are you suggesting besides proxy war against Russia, which we're already doing?
Infiltrate their institutions.
Well, Politicrat.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Politicrat, I've talked about an economic approach to crippling Russia, which is that they get 65% of their government revenues from the export of oil and gas. So if we in America and Canada, if we mass produce oil and gas and sell to Europe for cheap, we can lower the prices below their break even so that they go bankrupt and people come for Putin's head on a platter, even his own supporters, because he can't pay the bills. So my approach to Russia is drill, baby, drill. And I'm sick of them funding and supporting the Green Party so that we don't do that. So
that's not a terrible. Exactly. That's actually not a terrible plan.
Hey guys,
they promote the global warming memes and shit.
So I'm gonna head out.
Either that, or who's heading out?
Either that, or you can help Europe become less reliant on oil in general.
Okay, or there's another alternative, which is getting rid of the OPEC countries, regime change in Iran.
Bye.
I'm thinking
Who's leaving? Wait, whoa, hold on.
Call me Ron.
Me, I'm
Who's
leaving.
leaving?
I gotta take care of some stuff.
Oh, see you, Puma.
See ya.
Strategy, do you have anything you want to add? You haven't talked in a while.
Yeah, I want to say something about, you bringing up us, U.S. undermining Russia. They've been undermining us in a way, as well as China, with their use of our dollar and their trade transactions. So I want to know if you have anything to say about that, any of y'all, and what do you think the implications that could have for the U.S. empire? Because I'm not totally concerned about the U.S. empire. I come from it at a angle of our dollar's not going to hold up in these foreign markets, and for citizens that are U.S. citizens across the world, that could be very bad for them. But from the perspective that y'all are looking at, I want to know what are y'all's opinions on that?
Won't last abroad.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
What do you mean the U.S. currency won't last abroad?
No, I'm not saying it won't last. I'm saying our U.S. currency, they're not using it in trades any longer. It's actually gone down 90% in trades going on between Russia and China. That will hurt our dollar's value in foreign markets. So I want to know if y'all have anything to say about that. What do you think implications that has for the U.S. empire?
Their currency to the U.S. dollar, so this seems like a moot point.
I will have to head out, but it was nice talking to you. But yeah, thank you. McCarthyist Machiavelli imperialist, signing off.
Man, you killed it tonight. You killed it tonight, imperialist.
Good job, Kevin Castley. All right.
Stay basic. Keep on rocking in the free world, my dude.
All right, man. Take care.
Peace, Warhawk.
I just don't understand.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to, because I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
So, like, I don't understand the point you're making. So, Russia is starting to use their dollar less in international trade. We don't even do that much trade with Russia in the first place. So, like,
no, our trade doesn't matter, but our trade with them doesn't matter in the sense of the value our dollar is holding. When they use our dollar in trades between Russia, Russia trading with any country, them using our dollar, it helps keep our dollar's value in foreign markets. Therefore, that means, say you travel to Russia, if our dollar is being used more in their trades, then our dollar can buy more over there. I want to know from y'all's perspective, because I don't know much about the y'all's viewpoint. Is our dollar being hurt and not really being used well in markets?
Guys,
and
listen to me. Listen to this plan. Listen to this evil plan I have for a soft.
Hold on. I want to get Casley's opinion on this. It's a serious question I do have. Does that in any way undermine the U.S. empire?
So I just want to understand the question correctly as you phrased it, Stratty. You're arguing that increased trade between Russia and China has undermined the standing of the U.S. dollar in the world economy.
When they're not using the U.S. dollar, because in the past year, the U.S. dollar's use in these trades has dropped 90%.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, no, that's true. They are trying to form an alternative to the U.S. dollar, and in the long run, that can become problematic. My solution to that is economically cripple Russia within 5 years of us massively saturating the world economy with oil to the point of it being a loss. Like, it's not about making money in the short run. It's about avoiding a nuclear war. We destroy them economically. We get rid of Russia by doing that, because in 2014, it was bad for them, right? That was bad when oil prices were really low. They couldn't afford to pay the pensions. If we can hold that heat on for 5 years, and just because they need about $80 a barrel, if we do it, like if we bring it down to $20 a barrel for 5 years, they'll go bankrupt. Putin will be done. With China, the best way that we can do, because basically, to answer your question, the only way that we're going to be able to solve that is to take out these countries economically. They're going to do what they do. With China, we blockade them. We say, you know what, you're done. Nothing gets in or out for trade, airspace, naval, whatever. And any countries, including Switzerland or France, if they want to trade with communist China, they're getting sanctioned. Because if we don't take them out and cripple them economically and bankrupt them soon, then eventually there will be a war, and they're gearing up for a war. And so the best way we can do it is just neutralize both of them economically. And China is not North Korea. They are deeply dependent on the world economy, and they aren't used to sleeping with their AKs and eating grass like the North Koreans are. They will demand the CCP's heads on a platter, because the only reason the communists have legitimacy is because they provided jobs. If those jobs dry up when there's no more trade and they go back to Maoist autarky, the people are fat, they like KFC, they like their Gucci swag, they're going to come and demand Xi Jinping's head on a platter. And so within 5 years of holding the heat on these two rival powers, they'll both be done and dusted. And now that's not the full end game, because you could say a new government will rise up. It's at that point that we move into balkanize Russia. And it's at that point that we move into make the government in Taiwan the government of mainland China as well. And then that deals with, and they would be forced to use US dollars basically at that point.
Kevin, I have a response to that. For one, the U.S. dollar is already way too intertwined with the world market economy that I don't see a dramatic shift in or dramatic decrease in the dollar's use in international trade. And on top of that, China is experiencing unsustainable amounts of economic growth. That's not going to last. The bubble's going to burst, for what it did in Japan back in the early.
Right, but we can speed up that process. Is what
I'm saying. Okay, I see what you mean now.
I want to destroy both of them, right? So
actually, I'm going to say that I do actually have to agree with Kevin on this. For once, a paleocon and a neocon actually come into agreement, because, look, if we're going to be producing oil through fracking, then that would mean that we would add thousands of jobs to the U.S. economy.
Yes.
And we could put the American worker first, and at the same time actually do some intervention, which he would like. So it would actually be a pretty good compromise.
Absolutely. No, I'll say this. Paleocons and neocons can work together. They did so under Ronald Reagan. Basically, I'm kind of a protectionistic guy. I'm willing to give the paleocons the social domestic agenda and the economic domestic agenda, as long as I get the foreign policy agenda, basically. You know?
Well, I'll say this, Kevin. Obviously I disagree with that solution, but I do appreciate that you have an honest answer to that, because most neocons, when I bring up questions dealing with our dollar and its use across the world, they don't really have an answer, or they just kind of write it off as irrelevant. But it plays a big part in the issues that happen regarding.
Well, Kevin, the thing about Kevin, he's actually done his research. So
no, I just want to be clear here. I did a degree in economics and everything, and I can tell you that the vast majority of people that study economics, they come from the neoliberal, the woke, coastal bubbles. They don't have the interests of the worker at heart. I'm working class, always been working class. I have the interest of our manufacturing at heart. One of the reasons why I want to blockade communist China, apart from them being the enemy and everything, is that we did a huge disservice to ourselves in America and Canada and Britain when we outsourced our manufacturing base to Red China, basically gave the communists the manufacturing base. Because here's the thing, I'm not opposed entirely to outsourcing per se. I'm fine with like India making shirts and stuff. I'd rather have a country, but I'll tell you this, there will be a third world war at some point. Now, I'm trying to make it as least deadly as possible. I'd rather deal with these guys economically. But if that happens, or when that happens, imagine you didn't have, like, all your factories and stuff were over in the enemy territory. I want to have, like, all the essential stuff here, and even some of the non-essential stuff here, so that when World War III breaks out, or in the run-up to it, you can say, hey, look, we're turning these factories into producing tanks or producing airplanes and stuff. If all of them are in China, and all you've got are, like, some tech headquarters where it says designed in California but made in China, how is that tech headquarters with Apple? How are they going to be switching over to produce missiles or something? It's not going to happen. So I want to bring the jobs back. I'm a protectionist. I'm not open borders. I know Socrates is basically making me out to be an SJW or whatever. I'm not. That's ridiculous. I am definitely more protectionist than your typical neocon. I'm also more hawkish than your typical neocon. But I think that this idea that the working class doesn't matter, or that the dollar doesn't matter, that comes from a bubble of privilege from people who are like literally millionaires. I'm not, so.
Would you consider, Kevin, would you consider yourself, if you had to choose, more of a populist or an elitist?
Neither. I'm an anti-populist and I'm an anti-elitist. So
okay.
I can
maybe a pluralist, maybe?
Well, no. I want to be clear on something. My problem with the elites is that they, by and large, are these coastal, aggressive gremlins who they don't have the interest of working people at heart. They're flagless neoliberals that they're totally fine to trade with the enemy, to trade with Red China.
Agree with that,
it means that they can make a quick buck. But I'm also anti-populist because populism can mean anything. My friend Wyatt Claypool of the National Telegraph, very conservative guy, he's also anti-populist. And why? Because he says, populism can mean anything. And here, I'll run you through a quick thought experiment. Let's say you had a populist guy like Donald Trump. He comes out there and he tells you, I'm going to lower your taxes if you vote for me. And he's a populist. And people are like, oh yeah. And Tucker Carlson comes out there and says he's a populist. And everybody's, oh, that's great. Okay, now let's say we got Bernie Sanders out there and he's a populist guy and he says
populism is more of a tactic.
I'm going to raise your taxes and all this kind of stuff. It's like, wait, so is populism, like, it doesn't have any sort of ideology. Anything can be populist. And so my problem with populism is that by and large it plays into the personality cult and the prestige of whatever the leader figure is, and it does nothing for the American people. George Bush did 1,000 times more for the American people. He got border security. He even got Democrats to vote for border security. Trump didn't get the wall. He didn't do anything to really clamp down on undocumented immigration and whatnot, apart from some just kids in cages stuff. But he didn't go after the CEOs of these meat packing plants that use undocumented immigrants so that they don't have to pay a fair wage to American workers. And I'm not anti open borders and all that because, like, I hate undocumented immigrants. I'm sick of them getting screwed over by these CEOs, and I'm sick of the people getting screwed over by them. They're a bunch of progressive gremlins that don't give a crap about anybody here. Like I said, they're flagless neoliberals. And for me, I'm pro-West. I'm pro-our interests. I'm not pro-corporate interests. So now I'm not anti-corporation, but they have to serve the national interest. So that's the national interest trumps everything. Because if we don't win and they win and we become a colony of China or Russia, then it doesn't matter what our domestic policy is.
I say we turn Russia into a vassal state and then use them against China.
Well, no, we should balkanize them. We should fund rebels in Chechnya. We should fund rebels in Dagestan. We should fund rebels in every corner of that region possible, so that they become like 50 states that hate each other.
I don't know about
I have to get off. I just want to say, Kevin, I mean, I hate neoconservatism. I really disagree with it a lot, but I want to say thank you for being the most rational neocon I've ever heard speak.
Oh, I quote, man. That's funny.
It's refreshing to just hear a rational neocon, but I'm gonna have to get off. I would like to come back on another time with y'all. Have
Of
a lot of
course,
fun.
yeah. No, I was
but-
thinking because I was thinking of ending this in 20 minutes anyway, and then maybe we
Okay.
could do a follow-up episode at some point if any of you guys are interested.
I'm fine. I'm down with that. I'd probably have a little more preparation ahead of time because most of the things y'all talk
Yeah,
about.
I think that was the biggest thing. I think that
yeah.
I feel like I should have made this a little more structured in terms of the topics. I feel like
Well,
But I mean, I still had fun. Y'all are
So
cool, and
I'll say this,
Kevin,
Stratty, I think if we do like an economics thing or something based on what you've said, we'd probably have more agreement than the
yeah,
foreign
no, that's why I wanted to ask that question because I was like, okay, well, yeah, he makes a little sense on some things, but no, I would like to talk more in the future. I gave you a follow on Twitter, but I'll see y'all. Have fun.
all right. Yeah,
Have a
and I
good night.
appreciate. And also, I just wanted to say one more thing. In case anybody who's watching right now, I'm trying to get to 220 subscribers by the Roman Saturnalia, aka December 17th. And if I do that, I will personally donate 12 children's books to my local literacy council, so underprivileged children will have something to open up on Christmas. So that's my goal right here. Might make a video on it. And if I get 300 subscribers by December 31st, I will personally make a video on the movie Shrek and talk about why it is about eminent domain, a criticism of eminent domain.
Well, I'll tell my followers and my subscribers to check out your channel. Like I'm going to mirror it as we discussed. I'll put the link to your channel below. So, and I got about almost 400. So hopefully some of them will come over to your channel and subscribe.
Okay,
Yeah, that'll be great.
Kevin, I would address your outsourcing claims. You realize outsourcing is mostly myth, right?
What? I didn't hear that. What?
You realize that outsourcing jobs to stuff like China, Mexico is mostly myth, right?
Meth?
Myth.
Meth?
Myth. MYF.
Then where are the factories? Why does the Rust Belt exist?
Okay, let me tell you that. All right. So, for one, increased automation has made certain manufacturing jobs obsolete. You realize that, right?
Some, but automation has existed throughout history in various forms, not just robots. Like it's a way of augmenting the workers that are already there. That's happened in the 1800s with shipbuilding processes. It didn't lay people off. It meant that they became more efficient. You know,
that new jobs always come along. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
Of creative construction.
Okay, yeah. But the thing is,
How can you say it's a myth? How can you say that?
Plus Alka-Seltz. So I'm gonna go a little spurgy here, but you also must remember.
I have more explanations of to why the Rust
No,
Belt.
I was about to say you're misusing the word myth because myths are not necessarily false. They just are not literal. They are mythology conveys metaphysical truths. You must understand that. I hate when people misuse the word myth. So I'm gonna stop being.
Jordan Peterson.
I was trying to be more Joseph Campbell, but okay.
Whatever. That reminded me of Jordan. Okay, but also
yeah.
you have to So on top of that, you realize lots of the manufacturing that has moved out of the Rust Belt has gone to the southern United States, and the main reason is because in the southern United States there's a lack of unionization, so it's cheaper to employ people in the South because of the lack of unionization. And the reason there's a lack of unionization is because for a long time it wasn't safe to employ people in factories in the South because it was too damn hot. The Great Lakes area was cool enough to employ people in factories full time. But with the advent of air conditioning,
Are you pro unionization?
Am I pro-union?
Yeah.
I'm neutral on it.
Okay, because I'm anti-unionization, like vehemently.
Oh, okay.
I used to work in a union. I'll never work for a union again. So.
Oh, okay. This isn't a criticism of unionization. It's just a fact, right? So, and on top of that, so in addition to the cooler climate, the Great Lakes provided an easy way to transport those manufacturing goods throughout the country. But the thing is, after the U.S. built a large road infrastructure after World War II, especially the interstate system, transportation costs became mostly negligible. So you could pretty much build a factory anywhere and not have to worry about transportation costs. So you couple those things together, very few of those jobs have outsourced to China. And because if they truly were outsourced, you would see a decrease in American manufacturing, and you really haven't.
That's not true. The American economy, but look, when I say the Rust Belt, you're right to note that the geography of a lot of the factories changed, and that doesn't necessarily imply a loss. I was more using that metaphorically, but I know that that is a specific geographic area. But when we talk about the American manufacturing base, it's undeniable that a great bulk of American consumer manufacturing has been shifted over to, for the most part, China. It was also Japan and some other areas, but communist China is the worrying one because they're an enemy, and that's a problem. And so, additionally, in many cases, it wasn't even so much that a particular plant existed where they were producing a product and then that product got moved to be produced in China. The iPhones and stuff like that were never even considered to be produced in America. Like it's a systemic problem in the sense that it's gotten so bad where it's not even outsourcing per se. People just they open the plant initially in China. They never even considered hiring American workers. That's a big problem. And that's not technically outsourcing because the jobs were never in America, but you get my point. It's just it's as equally a problem for national security, equally a problem for the economy. So, and this is true.
I'm not denying that, like the large U.S. Intertwined economy with China is. I'm not denying that's a national security threat. I absolutely agree with you, and something must be done by that. I just take issue with the claim that like there's been large amounts of outsourcing to China when it's just not the case.
Oh, but you understand when I say something like they always produce the iPhone or they always produce this in China, they never considered even having American jobs to outsource. That's actually worse than outsourcing.
Okay, what about this? What about this, guys? So instead of protectionist policies, instead of something like tariffs, why not instead do we say, okay, so you can outsource if you want, but if you stay here and hire domestic, we will give you additional tax cuts, something like that. Sort of use incentives within the market.
I mean, I want to abolish
putting
corporate income
restrictions
tax anyway. So
what?
Sure.
What?
I want to abolish corporate income tax. So sure.
Okay. So my approach is a straight up blockade on communist China. I'm not even opposed to say simple unessential processes being done in, say, for example, India or Taiwan. The problem that I have is just this idea that we're totally comfortable with this idea that corporations are going to be people, which I'm not necessarily 100% opposed to, but people have to be patriotic. They have to have an allegiance. And if corporations are going to have these kinds of rights, they have to put the national interest first. And if they violate that, and I get it, you say your fiduciary responsibilities are to your shareholders, it would be very easy enough to say, instead of doing all this subsidization and everything, no, we're just going to straight up fine you if you go outside and trade and do manufacturing in the enemy, basically. So
speaking about someone say shareholders or something.
Well, no, I was just saying that corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders.
Yeah, no, which is actually funny because this is kind of me going off topic for a second.
The government, though, has a responsibility to persecute traitors. And if corporations are going to be people and they're going to make stuff in Red China, then those corporations should just be dissolved under treason. And
logically speaking, that is actually a very good argument. I don't necessarily agree, but that is a very good argument.
If you get the rights of people, people can be tried for treason. I would say the actions of Apple, for example, have been treasonous. And now you can say you can't prosecute back in the day if we're going to have a new law coming in. Okay, but they need to understand these are the new terms. If you're going to be aiding the enemy and you want to be a corporation, you want all these benefits, that's fine. We're shutting down your corporation just as we would shut down the Rosenbergs for passing nuclear secrets. Now, corporations, you can't do the electric chair, but you can simply say your assets are now the property of the United States government and they will be treated as such and expropriated, basically. And before any communists or anything get at me, I'm not. I'm so anti-communist, I'm literally willing to shut down our own corporations for trading and enriching the communists in China. So
yeah, that's the thing. I don't know why. Every time it's just like you want to do a little protectionism. It's like, you're a communist because communists care about. Apparently, they care about local.
Protectionism isn't communism. Protectionism is it's mercantilism, more or less.
Yeah, well, no, but mercantilism, it's a little bit different, but I know it has a lot of negative connotations because of the woke neolibs, by the way. And I know that there are a lot of cool neoliberals out there that I disagree with on some stuff, but they're more like Reagan and Friedman types, and they look at the today's neolibs where they're all horny posting about how they're attracted to AOC and they want to like jerk off on their feet and stuff. And you're like, are you serious, man? Like what Reagan and Thatcher and Mulrooney and all these guys, would they be down with that? Probably not.
No, it's the Chad Mount Pelerin neolib versus a virgin modern neolib.
Yeah, that Simps Medlock.
Or Perlin, is it Perlin or you know what I mean, right? The Mount
Literally it doesn't even matter. I just want to say right now, I want to make a very quick point on this. I did a video recently, you can go and check it out, called A Little Protectionism Never Hurt Anyone. And I also interviewed and did a panel with my friends and huge supporters, awesome patrons of my channel, Net7 and Wyatt Claypool. Those guys, we basically, on several occasions, came to the conclusion, for neocons, we seek a neoconservative renaissance in the future where we take back the world from the era of cringe, and we promote our interests, not our enemies' interests. But here's the deal: we can't say just because we disagree with Tucker or Trump on their foreign policy blunders, that doesn't mean that we have to overlook or oppose them on economics. They've got a lot of good economic points. The problem with Trump is that he didn't pursue them hard enough. The problem with Tucker is that he's an Assad apologist. He simps North Korea. He simps the Russians. But for once, can we just get a leader like Curtis LeMay or Thomas Power or Harry Truman, somebody who's going to put American manufacturing first, somebody who's going to put American interests first, or likewise in America and Canada and Britain, all of our equivalents, as opposed to simping for the goddamn Communist Party of China and their realty deals.
Kevin, I'd actually, just real quick, I'm going to recommend a book that you might like, Kevin, that came out about 5 months ago or so. It was The New Class War by, I think Michael Lind was his name.
I have not read that. No.
Okay. Like, you're aware who he is, right?
No, actually, I'm not.
Okay. He's like sort of he's like a neoconservative intellectual. I don't know if he calls himself a neoconservative, but we actually have real quick. So for the last few minutes, we're going to bring on Outreamer, who is pretty non-interventionist, but he's not a libertarian or a paleocon.
All right. Well, hold on. Kevin, can I ask your position? What is your position? Are you pro TPP?
Ooh, there's a little bit of nuance.
That's for an economic. That is for another night of economics.
No. I'll say that.
To do with foreign policy.
No. It is relevant to foreign policy. I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier, to be honest. I
actually want to save that for part 2 because I wanted to bring in another person. Yeah, I'm trying to. I don't want to go for any longer than 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Y'all will just have to subscribe to my channel where in the post game I'm going to do a stream. I'll give my position on the TPP and then build an hour. So.
All right. How are you doing this evening, Outreamer?
What's up? So I imagine based on your previous point that we're already kind of wrapped up at this point.
We're starting to wrap up. Yeah, we're going to go probably another. I don't want to go any longer than 2 hours 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Well, I don't know the larger context of the conversation. Are we debating the merits or demerits of neoconservatism as a philosophy, or are we just asking Mr. Casely some?
Oh wait, guys,
it was the former. Oh, good night, Alkazai.
All right, catch you later, Al. Yeah. So I don't know where you want me to start with neoconservative. Do you want like a critique of neoconservatism from the political right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're all on the right, basically. So sure.
Oh, I thought Alkazai was on the left, but
wait, he's on the left?
No, okay. So, by Outreamer's definition, yes, he's on the left.
Wait, what's Outreamer? What are you?
I'm reactionary, so I'm for the. So, all right. So, do you want me to lay out like my personal issues with neoconservatism as it exists as a philosophy, or do you want me to lay out my critiques of neoconservatism as it exists as a movement?
Both.
Because okay,
do that, and I want to see what Mr. Castley here.
Well, again, I don't know how much time we're going to have to sort of.
About 20 minutes. We have about 20 minutes.
Well, if we're going to go for another 20 minutes, can we do like a 1 minute intermission so I can get some more water?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
sure. I need some more too.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
Can you run me through some of the stuff while he's getting water and everything? I also don't want this to like turn into a shouting match or anything like that. I like it.
It hasn't been. It's been very civil, wouldn't you say?
Oh,
Very
very
civil?
well. Oh, that's
Yeah, it's been civil except a few times.
my dude.
Yeah,
It's so difficult having conversations in some of the servers I've been in the last couple of weeks. I know.
Don't worry though. I almost had LSP in here tonight.
Oh, I probably would not have come on if that.
Yeah.
There's just it's very, very difficult to try and get through to certain people. I've sort of come to the understanding that there's some segment of sort of online political YouTube and stuff that you're just not going to be able to have any kind of conversation with. So I know Stardust wants to bring me on his channel to do a sort of interview about some of the more violent rhetoric we see coming in the direction of the right in the near future. But I'm still working out the details with him on that.
Okay. So yeah, that'd be. Is he a YouTuber?
Who Thinking Ape?
Wait, who did you mention just a second ago?
Yeah, Stardust, aka Thinking Ape.
Oh, okay. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he does the rounds on a lot of people's channels. I think he's an expat, but very intelligent guy, pretty cool for the most part. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think
is he reactionary?
No, he's not he's more so. I think he's politically agnostic. But he's been sort of caught up in a lot of the culture war stuff going on for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
But I think he lives out in Korea or something like that. But
I'm still working on having Sargon come on my channel.
Well, he's been doing the rounds. I know he was over on Don the Pleb show recently. So
yeah, he was, and then he was on, and then he recently go on with Settlers of Lament again.
I know that they finished talking about Yarvin's article.
They're talking about Moldbug, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Everybody wanted Sargon to go talk it up with Distributist, but I think Distributist has been backing off of a lot of stuff recently. Just
too degenerate for the Distributist.
No, I think what it is, like Sargon and Distributist had a really interesting talk about a year or two ago about sort of like postmodernism and how it's affected religious institutions. But for the most part,
Sargon's just a typical Enlightenment atheist.
No, it's not even that. It's like you can see that Sargon is starting to reach some of the dissident conclusions about a lot of the stuff that came out of the Enlightenment.
Maybe he'll get Anglican pilled.
I think he is. Well, I don't think he's ever going to go back to church or anything like that. But you can see in a lot of the former skeptics who are
even Sam Harris is less.
Oh, like that was the big conversation that Thinking Ape wants.
Sam Harris is like getting into. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Harris in 10 years is a perennial traditionalist.
Did you know? Like or something? He's not headed towards the political right. Did you listen to his most recent podcast?
Actually, let's save this for a post stream conversation.
Yeah, just go if you just go listen to his. Just as a final pin on this, if you go listen to his latest podcast, like the kinds of psychopathic utterances that he's now openly espousing towards people on the right are the kind of stuff I would expect out of somebody like Vaush or somebody like.
Can we actually like save this for like a post stream discussion?
Yeah, sure. we can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, neoconservatism. A brief overview of the philosophy, and just to be clear on the terms, I define neoconservatism as the philosophy that was articulated as sort of acceptable conservative philosophy post New Deal. And it came out of figures like Leo Strauss. It became associated with the National Review, with figures like William F. Buckley. I don't think Thomas Sowell would describe himself as a neoconservatism, but the sort of the brand of neoconservatism.
He's more of like a basic bitch libertarian.
I wouldn't. I don't want to be disparaging towards.
No, I love Sowell. No, but I'm just saying like his. He's like a Cato type libertarian.
Yeah, so it's the philosophy that's generally associated with the likes of Ronald Reagan, William F. Buckley, Jack Kemp.
Yes, I probably will Toad for a little bit at least.
Milton Friedman, and of course Antonin Scalia.
Mm-hmm.
Some of its views are very, very accurate. There's elements of Burkeanism in neoconservative philosophy. There's elements of paleoconservatism in neoconservative philosophy. And basically what I mean by that is that neoconservatism in some ways does recognize the problems that reactionaries point out with liberalism and the Enlightenment. What is the problem with neoconservatism? Well, the problem with neoconservatism is, at its core, I don't think it's fundamentally honest about the issue, or maybe not honest is the wrong word. It compromises with many of the problems that emerged as a result of modernism in the 20th century. Now, we can debate whether or not that was necessary going forward after World War II. That was never an argument that the neoconservatives put forward, but in many ways, I think the strongest argument neoconservatives could put forward as a philosophy was that in the aftermath of World War II, we needed to compromise with things like the New Deal. We needed to compromise with things like what Eisenhower would call the military-industrial complex.
So, Alrimer, would you argue? So, you're talking about your take on sort of the origins of neoconservatism. That reminds me. So I have a book right here. Hold on. This book right here really touches on. Hold on. Has anybody ever read this one before?
No.
I've actually heard about. I've watched an interview on that.
So, Suicide of the West by James Burnham. It is more or less a critique on New Deal style. I have New Deal style liberalism and liberalism's constant drive to keep reforming, and more or less, he said it's going to keep reforming into oblivion.
Yeah, James Burnham was not a neoconservative. I would say James Burnham was a paleocon, but he could see the way the conservative movement was emerging.
Because even though he wasn't a neoconservative, he was a former Trotskyist, like many neoconservatives.
But his conclusions were much different than the sort of former Trotskyists of. I'm blanking.
Yeah, he wasn't an idealist.
Say what?
You're thinking like Irving Kristol and his acolytes.
Because I know Kristol and Burnham were actually friends in real life, and Burnham was a big time writer for the early National Review. Burnham was more of like a paleocon classical, maybe like a.
But the point is, what you're driving at is the thing that I would make about Burnham was I would actually put Burnham in the category of a paleocon who was listening to a lot of the reactionary criticisms of liberalism as a political philosophy.
He was definitely economically a liberal.
Most of the criticisms went down. Most of those criticisms were suppressed post 1960s. So what's the issue with neoconservatism as a philosophy? In my opinion, it compromises with a lot of the issues with the New Deal administration, which, as you know, Politicrat, I come from a school of philosophy that considers New Deal America to have effectively been the third American dictatorship. I don't think fundamentally the Constitution is a relevant document post 1945. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in the Constitution. That doesn't mean that I don't like it. But I think that the actual power apparatus in the United States was no longer oriented around really any recognizable interpretation of the Constitution that the founding fathers would have recognized by the end of FDR's administration. And the new sort of consensus or the new actual operating modus operandi of what we call the cathedral, or of what America was going to be going forward, was going to be essentially empire. Now, that doesn't mean.
Chungus Toad is talking about academic agent did make a video touching on this exact subject. Yeah.
And so, and this has been one of the problems within the right, is that the right has been divided on this sort of stuff. You've had various figures over the course of the last 50 to 75 years coming out and trying to figure out what the heck happened to the political right post World War II.
Buchanan, he's a great example.
Buchanan is.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a big fan of Buchanan personally, but I think he was a bit of a wake up call.
It's not just Buchanan. Right. It's who I'm blanking on the guy's name.
I mean, I would recommend, if you really want to see what happened to the right, you could just read Murray Rothbard's
Murray Ann Roth. That's exactly the guy I was just thinking of. Thank you, Al.
Kevin, Kevin, you're aware of who Rothbard is, right?
Rothbard, I've never actually read Rothbard, but as I understand it, Rothbard is more of a paleocon type libertarian.
Yes.
He is. Well, he also like flirted with anarchism and all that, but it's not.
But no, he jumped around. But the thing is, he was about making pragmatic alliances. Like, even though he was like always like economically hardcore laissez-faire, he would make alliance. He considered himself a far left Democrat in the '60s for pragmatic reasons.
We're moving into the philosophical.
Right. Yeah. Can we just kind of because this is going to go on a long time. The origins of neoconservatism and mainstream, or I should say neoconservatism and mainstream neoconservatism today, as well as, I don't fit the mold 100%. I use the label, I say I'm a liberal neocon with offensive realist characteristics, for me. But if we talk about people that are associated with neoconservatism in the last few decades, like Gene Kirkpatrick, you got, for example, Douglas Murray and some of these other people, they have very little in common in terms of their current views with the views of the early neocons that were compromising with FDR.
Let me put the question to you. Would you agree with the sort of policy proposals that came out of think tanks like the Project for a New American Century in the early 1990s?
Well, you'd have to run me through some examples specifically of what you're talking about, but in general, yes, with some caveats that I'm much more offensive realist about it and much less liberal in the IR term about it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
I'm a far more unilateral person. Like, neoconservatism is associated with unilateralism as opposed to liberalism, which is more multilateral. But within that, I'm extremely unilateral. I tweeted out earlier for today, for example, unilateralism in the face of feckless allies is no vice, it's a virtue. So I'm that kind of guy. So.
Well, I'm not critiquing that neoconservatism doesn't have a very well-defined connection to foreign policy.
Yeah.
With the critique that I primarily had, and we can debate realism versus defensive realism. We can debate neo-realism versus classical realism. I'm not debating foreign policy theories.
Okay.
The main critique that people in dissident spheres have of neoconservatism is that it's the dominant ideology within the political right. It's the ideology that has the majority of power going forward within the right post, I would say, Eisenhower.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say right now, because we're kind of a minority right now. But
well, it's difficult to say.
Well, I think also, can I actually say something real quick? Because I feel like I feel like a lot of people conflate neoconservatism, which is a very, very specific philosophical school on the right, with new conservatism, which refers to the National Review, Barry Goldwater type conservatism that included neoconservatism back in the 60s. And people use neocon just to refer to that sort of hawkish new conservatism in general.
That's
it was
the
just
reason why.
It was a very
the problem
specific
is that even with, if you try to make the distinction, those two schools of thought seem to.
Well, new conservatism isn't really a school of thought; it was more of a movement. Whereas neoconservatism,
but that's the reason why coming into this conversation,
still jumped on the bandwagon of that.
I was trying to distinguish very explicitly between neoconservatism, the philosophy, and neoconservatism as a movement.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm trying to actually be a little bit specific.
So from what would this actually be an appropriate way of describing you then, Kevin? So you are philosophically a neoconservative, but you're not really part of the movement, because you seem like you do disagree with a lot of the movement neocons.
Well, are we talking about like right now? Like, are we talking about like the Lincoln Project folks?
Yes,
are we talking about? Yeah, because here's the problem. Okay, I don't go with bandwagons and stuff. I don't like. There's no label to describe my exact ideology. Like, for example, I'm against the debt economy. That's a focus of mine, whereas most neocons don't really talk about that. It's not really like a thing. But for
many
me,
are also pro-social security too.
What? No.
Oh, I thought I've met a lot of neocons who are like for defending Social Security.
Yeah, they do that pragmatically. There are some that are more skeptical of of the viability of Social Security. For me, just on principle, I'm against the debt economy. I'm against Social Security. I believe that if we had a social contract where from the time you're 18 to the time you retire, you're in charge of your retirement, people would save a lot more. You know, I want to get us up to a 50 to 70% savings rate. I think that's how we would undermine and take back our economy from the debt economy, which has become a national security crisis. But we're getting off topic here. It's just to kind of go back to what you were addressing, which is, you know, the labels and all this kind of stuff. Generally speaking, a broad trend of things, the neoconservatism, you can kind of understand as the intellectual roots of it were informed by actually being in the lion's den and seeing the face of the radical left firsthand, and that those who came out of that experience, those who played the devil's advocate, those who did the memes and stuff like Irving Kristol and whatnot, they went on to be the most vociferous advocates of not just defending America, but promoting America's interests abroad. And the thing is, on a domestic level, it's important to recognize that there's always going to be compromises, and that by and large, a big focus of neoconservatism was the prevention of arrival to America, which goes in with some offensive realist understanding. It basically took the tenets of realist school of thought and a neo-realist school of thought and said, okay, we have these foundations to work with, but what do you do with that? We're going to put a moral compass on that, and we're going to use that to promote democracy, to combat communism, and to create a world in which we have this understanding that there are absolute goods and there are absolute bads, and America must be essentially the vanguard of liberty.
So that's
and
where,
America
that's where the Burkean conservatism then comes into play. Which
No, that's
tangential. That is adjacent, but Burke, like, you know, and libertarianism by and large, and or not libertarianism, but with Burke is more sort of like in the social conservative side of things and everything. A lot of the more neocon type thinkers, you know, and neocon adjacent type people like John Bolton and stuff took influence from Burke. But the thing to note, though, is that neoconservatism in terms of the social policy and even some of the economic policy is more soft. It's more flexible, which, you know, I can understand why, because the primary focus is America is the vanguard, America is the champion, America is the spearhead of the Western order, and the champion in producing an order that is amicable to the cause of freedom by and large, and then we can sort out the social stuff later on and everything. So a lot of neocons will vary in how socially conservative or liberal they are, and even how economically interventionist versus laissez-faire they are. But on foreign policy, that's the one big one where basically you start at hawkish and then you go on from there. Like, you know, it's entry-level neocons are already hawkish, and then people have said I'm on the fringes and stuff. I don't care. I'm a neocon with offensive realist characteristics. That's
I just want to like clarify something real quick here, Mr. How do you say your last name again? Casely.
Oh, Castley.
All right, Castley. I have not personally critiqued your own personal worldviews. I understand there's a lot of gradients here. This is why I asked going into the debate whether or not we would be going into things like policy. And again, I do understand that these are very broad criticisms, but there's one thing I've noticed coming up in the midst of this conversation, even just in the short time I've been here, that I think is really at the heart of the critique of the neoconservative counter-revolution, of the sort of rise of the transformation of the Republican Party into a primarily foreign policy party. You're saying the one thing that unifies Republicans is their commitment to foreign policy. From
traditionally, not anymore, but traditionally.
Yeah, and this is the reactionary critique of that figures like Burnham and figures like Buchanan, Rothbard, and also some older thinkers pre World War II were putting to
even like George Sorel, who was a socialist.
Yeah, there's a really interesting debate between William F. Buckley and Noam Chomsky back in like the 70s, where now it's clear that Buckley at an intuitive level kind of understood that Chomsky's criticism, he couldn't really answer it. Politics is not a primarily foreign policy experience. That's not where that's not primarily where the butter gets, or that's not primarily where the bread gets buttered. Politics as it exists is a domestic experience. It doesn't matter if you're trying to overthrow all these regimes across the world and replace them with democracies and liberalism. What does that mean if the democracies and liberalism that you're replacing them with are leading to these sorts of quasi-socialist experiments?
Wait, but Reamer, I've got a criticism for you though, because I've had people tell me before that are, they listen to my channel and stuff, but they say to me, they're like, but you don't talk about domestic policy enough. And my point has always been, the domestic policy is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you're pro-life, pro-choice, whatever, because if the communist Chinese take over, we're having forced abortions anyway. So if we lose the world and we become subjugated to the enemies, our domestic politics is whatever they say it is.
My sort of critique of that would be, you're living in a country in which 60 million children have been aborted since Roe v. Wade in 1960. This is the thing that Curtis Yarvin sort of quoted a couple of years back when he was doing his own research into some of the problems with the American right. It's this phenomena that reactionaries refer to when we say that Cthulhu swims slowly, but he always seems to swim to the left. And that's that the Overton window over time tends to shift to the political left, and this leaves.
Or what Michael Malice says about.
Yeah, well, Malice has been talking to Malice says, conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. Now it's pithy and it's not entirely accurate, but it's a observation that each generation of conservatives seems to be more right wing than the generation that comes after them.
Wait, you mean left wing or
no, right wing? The previous generation is always more conservative than the one.
I see what you're saying. That's true. Yeah.
There's a shift in the Overton window, and that's a result. Hold on one second, Politicrat. And that to me is a result of us not being able to focus on a domestic coalition. It is a result of various wings of the political right not invest. One, I don't think neoconservatives, and I am speaking as an ideology, I don't think that neoconservatives, classical liberals, this is changing, particularly in the last couple of years. But for the better part of the last 50, it doesn't seem like they've really had an understanding of how power actually works in the United States.
I can agree with that.
It seems very like, I like Thomas Sowell, I like Victor Davis Hanson, I even like figures like Mark Levin to a certain extent. But the thing is that when there's a problem when you're issuing out ultimatums, the way that you talk seems to imply that you believe you have more power than you actually do. To my mind, looking at American politics over the last 50 to 75 years, and particularly post-Obama administration, the only thing I can take away, and this is, I'm coming from pretty far on the right, is that the American conservative coalition does not exist in any sort of real form. Nobody's really concerned if they piss off the neoconservatives. Everybody is terrified of the progressives and the neoliberals. Nobody at Goldman Sachs is going to be worried if somebody insults Newt Gingrich. Somebody at Goldman Sachs might be very, very aware that certain criticisms of, say, the political history of Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris are publicized. And we're seeing this even in terms of big tech. We're seeing this. These are people who should, on paper, if this philosophy is correct, be absolutely willing to, if not work with us, cut a deal with us.
Oh, no, I'm willing to cut a deal. I'll tell you this. I'm willing to cut a deal. No, you guys have the social.
That's my point, is like big tech, neoconservatism, and the Republican Party of the post-National Review era put forward this idea that if we cut deals with corporations, they would be willing to do business with us. And yet I
can actually contest to this.
What we're seeing in the modern day is that not only are our corporate sponsors abandoning the Republican Party, they're actively bending the knee to the left.
Well, before you came in, we were talking, and I was making the point, corporations, and I don't claim to speak for like people like Bill Kristol or whatever here, but corporations, by and large, they've gone out of line. And I was making the point, if corporations are going to be people and all this stuff, what do people owe? They owe their allegiance. And the corporations these days, they've been trained with communists. I'm for the corporate death penalty. I'm for literally expropriating their.
And so am I. Mr. Cass. The issue is that I don't see how we have again, this comes back to the understanding of power. This comes back to the understanding of how successful neoconservatism has been as not necessarily a foreign policy based philosophy, although I do think that there's questions about that. It's a question about how successful we've been on the domestic front. Because let me put it like this: it doesn't matter if you beat the communist Chinese if we have some kind of proto-communist revolution here in the States. I mean, there are mainstream members of the Democratic Party right now advocating putting people like you and me on lists.
No, I know, and I call them out on my channel, man. We call it the SJWs. We call it the Black Lives Matter people. I literally think that.
No, I'm not even talking about
a terrorist group, man.
I'm not even talking about the activists. I'm talking about members of the actual parties. You've got
AOC.
You've got attorney generals in state in major electoral states basically coming out prior to the election and saying that they were going to help rig it. You've got, and if you're a believer in things like Spygate, which I am, then
I'm going to need some citations right now. I just want some quotes. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just
I'm thinking specifically about the Pennsylvania Attorney General prior to the election with his statements on his Twitter account regarding, I think it was Dominion voting machines. I'll see if I can pull up some quotes for you. But
yeah, because I can address those. I'm not saying that, like, I know that there has been.
Do you want me to talk about something more large scale? Or are you aware of the allegations regarding Spygate?
Define Spygate. Like,
Spygate,
I'm not.
Spygate is the term used by the Epoch Times to refer to the attempt by the Obama administration to levy their contacts in the intelligence services to spy on the Trump campaign.
So is the Epoch Times really that reliable? Because I know it's owned by
the Epoch Times is funded by the freaking Russians, dude.
Okay,
Why are you
no, it's actually no. It's not funded by the Russians. It's actually the front. It's actually owned by a Chinese cult.
It's not just the Epoch Times that have been talking about this. There's other elements. I mean, even James Comey himself has been admitting this in his book. What was his book? A Higher Loyalty, I believe.
Yeah,
it's the only thing the Epoch Times has been doing is.
Hey, wait, Outrimer, you remember Strange Seconds, right?
Oh, all right.
Remember Strange Seconds?
I do not.
No, he was a personal friend of mine.
I can't completely remember.
He was the lefty. He was on the we were talking about the riot stream a few months ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, he actually sort of an insider on that because his family, they know the Comeys. He went to school with his daughters. So he kind of had, he actually might be able to provide some insight here at a later time. I just wanted to say that because more as a reminder to myself.
Well, the only thing that the Epoch Times has been doing is they've been connecting the dots between things like the Flynn investigations, the Obama administration's request for FISA warrants, and the actual ongoings and the actual connections to holdover appointees like Andrew McCabe, James Clapper, John Brennan, and
on Flynn. On Flynn specifically, though, we do know that Flynn was acting as a Turkish agent and failed to register. That's not like a conspiracy theory. He was in violation of protocol around that. He didn't register.
I don't think his son did nothing wrong.
His actual prosecution was on different charges. If you want to try and that was also not the original accusation against him either. Do you remember the original accusation was that he illegally was leaking information to Kislyak?
I did hear about that, and
then they changed the accusation midstream because they needed something else that would stick. It was not.
Wait, but where's the evidence though? Because the evidence that I saw was he got about $500,000 that he was paid to represent the Turkish interest, but he didn't register.
I'm not even necessarily saying that he wasn't. And by the way, he was a private citizen at that point. If we're claiming that receiving money from foreign governments is something prosecutable under American law, which I am technically granting, every president since Richard Nixon would have been thrown into prison. It is not. It is not a. I mean, you can just look at what's the current great corruption scandal that's going on. It's the whole thing with Hunter Biden. Does anybody here think that there's going to be any kind of prosecution laid against Joe Biden or his son for their connections to the Chinese Communist Party?
Well,
Nope.
I thought you were going to go with Ukraine on that, but here's the thing: I like it comes down to you're
I don't
right.
even necessarily care about Ukraine. I mean, American politicians taking bribes is like German politicians in the 40s talking about the Volk. It's just
Okay, but isn't that a problem? Shouldn't we work to change that? Shouldn't we try to end the corruption?
because the next guy's not going to be corrupt. I'm not saying that it isn't a bad thing. I'm sort of looking at the duality of the way in which the law cuts. It's the problem isn't even necessarily the fact that politicians take bribes, or that American politicians have a penchant for taking money from foreign governments. The problem that I'm seeing, and the thing that I'm pointing out, is this power differential. If you're a Democrat, if you're a progressive in the United States,
Yeah.
you can take incredible amounts of money from foreign governments and nothing will be done to you because, in my opinion, and in the opinion of reactionaries, there is this thing that we call the cathedral, but what we mean, we mean it's a memeplex. It's an ecosystem of ideas that they've built up, which allows them to insulate themselves and wield power on the domestic front that right-wingers cannot match.
But Reamer, I got a follow up then to the idea of the cathedral on the domestic level. Do you agree with the Duginist agenda that they have been employing mimetic forces inside of Russia since the 90s, the early 1990s? They used our culture against us, our openness against us.
I don't even necessarily think that Alexander Dugin is describing a power differential. I don't like, if I read fourth generational warfare or fourth political theory, I honestly don't see that much difference between what Dugin is attempting to accomplish in Russia and something like third positionism.
Okay, but he laid this out in foundation geopolitics. No. He laid this out in foundation of geopolitics. I know people can talk about how America has all this power on their border and Russia doesn't have it over here. But no, on the information war, we're losing. The Russians have been on this for 30 years, and we're just trying to sort ourselves out. Like we're in a
position.
I think Dugin's too idealistic.
Actual divisions we're seeing in the United States are not the result of the Russians pitting us against each other, or the Chinese pitting us against each other. The divisions that we're seeing in the United States is because there's a bug in the philosophy that the United States is running on. There's flaws in the way in which we think about ourselves as people, and those flaws have been very, very slowly growing as fissures over the course of the last 250 years.
Which bugs?
You can't deny that the Russians are in the Chinese.
Yeah, nations play off against one another. I'm not denying that there's a foreign policy element here.
Okay.
But when I actually look at the origin of these conflicts, you can go all the way back. And again, just to support Mr. Castley's point, you can go back to the 1930s, and the KGB was running psyops out of Hollywood. But there were card-carrying members of the USCP in FDR's administration.
Oh yeah.
This is a thing. Nations do attempt to subvert themselves, but what we're describing is a phenomenon. From my perspective, and the perspective I think that feels a little bit more accurate, when I look at the actual direction of American politics, I don't see the division in the United States today as the result of foreign agents. I see the division in the United States today as the result of two different worldviews. To put it in a way that I think someone in Mr. Castley's position might better understand this, I think that it's a division between people who want to live in America, the country, and a division between people who want to live in America, the idea. And specifically America, the idea of this ever globally expanding monopole of techno capital and progressive social policies. And the people who want to live in America, the country, have an entirely different worldview. Their way of life flows naturally from the fact that they have to engage with life as it is. These are people who, not just in the Trump base, but to a lesser degree, I think, make up some of the Bernie elements. These are people who are looking for politicians who are basically going to come through with good domestic policies that support things like jobs and minimum and lower class income wages. These are people who don't have time to think about overthrowing dictatorships on the other side of the world, they have to think about what's going on with them. With their
Right, but we need the leaders. Look, okay, I'm a protectionist. I'm working class myself, but I'm somebody that believes that our leaders need to put the national interest first, because if we lose this thing, then we're going to become subjugated by our enemies, and then our domestic policies will be for Moscow and Beijing.
I see that the domestic. See, this is the thing that I'm getting at. And Chungus Toad is correct. This country has had two distinct cultures. That's partly what I'm touching on. I see but again, this is the thing. I don't see the national interest as primarily a foreign policy interest post 1992. I see the national interest as the primary thing that's killing us is not the Russians and the Chinese. It's not even the fact that we have bribery and corruption among our politicians. The primary problem that we have is that not only do we have corrupt politicians, not only do we have foreign adversaries, not only have we made enemies all across the world who are slowly moving in around us, not only do we not know who our allies are.
Made enemies? What's an example of an enemy that was made and doesn't despise America?
I would say the majority of the members of the OIC post-Iraq. I would say that the majority of, many of the former Russian states, in many of the Russian states in Central Asia.
Wait, you're saying that that's America's fault? The Russians have despised America for 100 years. The Cold War never ended, man.
You asked for examples of enemies that we've made. Are you saying that our relations with the Russians have improved or declined since, say, 2008?
They were horrible in 2008, and they're horrible now. I mean, I always knew that we were the enemy. So
well, I'll quote the former Defense Secretary James Mattis on this. I think it was his speech at the Center for Strategic and International Studies not too long ago. The relationship between Russia in the 1990s and Russia in the early 2000s was demonstrably better than the relationship between Russia and the United States in 2020. Now, if that's just a result of geopolitics, if that's just a result of the Game of Thrones, we can debate that. I think
it's not America's fault. Like America pretended that the Cold War was over.
I think that there's decisions that could have been made that would have been more how to put this, more clairvoyant, but
hey man, I agree. We should have balkanized Russia in the 90s. This idea of accepting them as a status quo power is crazy.
Again, this is the question that we're getting at. If we're simply arguing over how to carve up nations and ensure that we play balance of power games, okay, tit for tat, they're going to come after you in the same way. Now, maybe they're going to come after you anyway, but
yeah,
you can't essentially put forward the argument that the only interest that we have is spreading liberalism and democracy. My point is that, from my perspective, is what neoconservatism as a philosophy is actually doing is it's clearing the world for a certain brand of progressivism that a lot of right-wing and even working class people in general find very poisonous.
Well, can you define that brand of progressivism? Because like what progressivism does any figures associated with
the techno capital? Well, what the reactionaries would prefer as the techno capital neoliberal.
Okay, but like I'm against neoliberalism. I'm against free trade with communists, that kind of stuff. Like,
the point is that you don't etymologically disagree with neoliberalism. Neoliberalism, for example, is more in favor of things like free trade with communists, but it also has this same bent of creating regimes that target things like traditional cultures and ultimately deconstruct them in order to.
That's more. I mean, you can also, that goes back to Foucault too, who was like.
Well, again,
who was himself a hardcore economic liberal. Like he considered himself a classical liberal, neoliberal.
Foucault's critique of modernism came down. There's a really great video that sort of summarizes the crisis between modernism and postmodernism, but I think we're going over the time limit here, so we do have to sort of drive a.
Yeah, let's go for another 8 minutes, and then I'll.
Okay.
All right. So just to put a pin in this is, and again, none of this is meant to be an attack on Mr. Casely himself. The issue that some of dissident figures have been identifying with neoconservatism is the issue with its focus on foreign policy over domestic policy. There needs to be, in my opinion, if the right wing is actually going to survive as any kind of relevant force, even within the institutions that it promotes, then it needs to have an actual domestic coalition. It needs to have things that it stands for and that it fights for in the same way that the progressives have that coalition.
Okay, well, Outremer, here's the deal. Here's the deal. I proposed this on my channel before. I said, if we're going to have a great neocon renaissance where it's like the Reagan era and everything, here's an idea. Here's just a compromise. Neocons get the foreign policy agenda, and people in your camp get the domestic agenda. How about that? Because we need to move towards a more protectionistic dimension on economic relations. Obviously, the neoliberal status quo has been a disaster. I am not a traditionalist as you would identify, but I'm willing to make a deal. You guys get the Supreme Court picks, that kind of stuff, and then the neoconservatives get the national interest, the foreign policy. How about that? Because Reagan
I think that'd be a fair deal. I think where, in
cutting backroom deals already.
In pure pot, I'm not a sort of political idealist here. I would prefer something of a more Jacksonian policy, but part of the issue
would you consider yourself a populist, Outremer?
Well, I think that populism is inevitable within democracy. Do I think it's a good thing? Not in general, but I think that what we're seeing.
Outremer, you're talking about a coalition, and I'm saying straight up, here's just an idea. We do it like Reagan did. You bring in the more social conservative type people on the domestic issues, and you form an alliance with people like Jeane Kirkpatrick and stuff on the international stuff. And they did Pinochet. They stopped the communists in Nicaragua.
Well, Pinochet, that was.
The question is,
Pinochet was Nixon.
Can I make up a point too?
Yeah, Grayson's been trying to get it.
Yeah.
I would say though that if we're going to probably bring in the right, I do have reservations about probably not going towards the evangelical side like Reagan did. That was kind of
no, fuck the evangelicals.
Wait, Outremer, are you evangelical, or what's your stance?
No, I'm a papist, but in terms of actual movement forward, I think the issue with the Reagan coalition and the issue with the evangelicals is, one, Protestantism was already in the midst of its own spirit, and this is the larger issue with Christianity. It's not just Protestantism. The Orthodox were largely occupied by communist nations. Catholicism's been in its own form of crisis since Vatican II, and Protestantism's been in a crisis since the end of World War I. The issue with religious coalitions is that the religious element of a society, it doesn't even really make sense to be religious if you have this sort of, what was his name? Pat Robertson?
Oh, fuck that guy.
The evangelical? Yeah.
He's
you have these sorts of.
Honestly, no.
I'm just. You're talking about traditionalism and everything, but then you're talking about.
Let's save the guys. Okay, let's save it for
but America is not traditionally Catholic. Let's just be clear about that. I'm not religious, but if I was going to be, I would be a Calvinist. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. So,
again, I'm not even necessarily saying that. I'm supporting your point here. I'm very, very aware of the fact that my country is not moving in the direction of any kind of religious and spiritual tradition. Although I think that would do an excellent. If you wanted to tamp down on some of the questions about race or some of the questions about, let us say, the more violent forms of 20th century philosophy that are starting to make a comeback out of the mouths of American politicians, the way in which you would
communism, fascism.
If you wanted to tamp down on some of that stuff, I think that a spiritual society, an axiomatically oriented spiritual society would probably do a lot to do that, but I don't see that as in the cards either. primarily because
both those violent ideologies you speak of are modernist ideologies too.
Yeah, they are modernist. I'm not debating that point, but in terms of like what I actually do believe, though, if you're asking whether I'm a traditionalist, Mr. Castley, of course I am. But I don't define.
Tradition?
Say what?
Which tradition?
Well, traditionalism.
He's a lowercase traditionalist. I'm a capital T traditionalist. If anybody knows what that means.
Yeah, if you're asking like what I believe, I think that there's elements of Guinonian. I come out of school. I've been convinced out of atheism and nihilism by the writings of figures like Guénon and by the writings of figures like Wolfgang Smith. But
Lings is also good.
Say what?
I said Lings is also good.
Wait, can you clarify on that? So you are no longer an atheist, or you are an atheist?
Yeah, I've moved away from atheism.
Okay, but is that because you believe that transcendental observation is better to keep social order, or do you actually believe?
No, I actually have been convinced that there are legitimate philosophical questions that materialism and nihilism do not have good answers for, such as the absurdity. Okay. For example, the emptiness of materialism as it refers to things like qualia, the irreducibility of consciousness, the observation of constructive behaviors. These are.
Well, I have criticisms of materialism and whatnot as well, but obviously, but.
Well, that would imply to me, if you, well, again, this would be a fascinating conversation to have. Is we could get into things like metaphysics, but if
that is for my other stream, which I keep saying I'm going to start the Homo sapien agenda is what I'm going to call it.
But once you get into things like traditionalism and once you get into things like metaphysics, it essentially implies that there should be a form of idealism that should guide us.
Well, I am kind of an idealist, so
no,
I think we have
not necessarily idealist.
Be a Hegelian idealist.
I'm saying like not necessarily an idealist as in principle.
Hegelian idealist.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So,
but
how is this going to end in 8 minutes? Like, there's
okay. Let's actually start. We're really starting to get off topic. We're starting to delve down the perennialist rabbit hole.
This stream is going to end any year now, but
no, this isn't the longest one we had. You were on Outrigger. We're 3 hours and 15 minutes long.
Yeah, so if
we don't want that.
We've been going for about 2:40.
I'd say we were originally going to end at the 2:15 mark.
Do you want to put final points on?
Yeah. So, but I want to draw it specifically back to foreign policy, intervention, specifically neoconservatism, but just interventionism versus non-interventionism in general. We will end with Mr. Castley here, because I know he's going to have the most to say about it, but we will start with Grayson.
Well, I learned that there is probably more of an argument to be made over the economic warfare. Certainly. Maybe not actual intervention, but I'm definitely more convinced that maybe we should come out of the shadow of isolationism and with some economic intervention to prevent a Chinese-dominated world. Also, I have a channel. I hope you will subscribe to it. I still call it Hungry Country Ball. And I also want to see if I can get Kevin on one of my streams against the leftists, because that would be very fun to watch.
Against the leftist?
Yeah, I have a lot of leftist friends because I used to work at one of those leftist organizations.
Okay. Then he got fired.
My recommendation is do it in a professional setting.
Yeah.
And then, so next, Aristocratic Owl. I know you weren't able to say much on here, but you got to come on for a little bit, at least. You were on our last foreign policy episode, which was about, I think it was late August or so. And you have more to say there. I know you're generally you're generally an isolationist. But so I just want to hear your thoughts just on this real quick before we go.
Yeah, well, generally speaking, like you just said before, I am more in favor of supporting your domestic policies within the reactionary sphere of influence, and especially with trying to fill the. Well, yeah, I haven't actually. Well, but yeah, basically protecting going in with a domestic. Sorry, I don't have much to say just because I didn't come on earlier, so I wasn't able to fully there. But generally speaking, Outrima and I tend to agree a lot on when it comes to foreign policies.
Okay.
Just let you know.
All right, and Outrimer?
Are you asking specifically for like what my position on
Final thoughts.
Yeah, my position is the best interest of the United States right now would be served by a Jacksonian foreign policy. Do the Chinese need to be confronted? Yes. Do the Russians need to be confronted in Eastern Europe? Yes. I think it's a little bit more critical right now that the United States figure out who's actually on our side, who would actually back us up in something like an existential war.
In the end, I think Russia's more likely to side with us.
Hey, I just want to lay it all out there. I don't want to go down any more of these rabbit holes. I think the primary issue that the United States has from a military foreign policy perspective right now is we don't know who's on our side. Now, that's not the same as me saying we don't know who we have a treaty with. I'm not talking about treaties. I'm talking about who would actually back us up if we were to call them in a war. That, and we're in treaties with these people. We're obligated to send defense contracting and funds and military support. But do we really think that if we got into a war with the Chinese, that nations like the Philippines or Vietnam would come in on our side? I'm skeptical of those claims. And it's not just that. You can see this in places like Europe. Now, the foreign policy establishment post-Trump administration seems to be on a lot of this stuff, but this feeds into the larger opinion that I have, which is that domestic policy goals need to be the objective. And I'll just put it like this before I shoot it over to Mr. Castley or Mr. Castley. If I were the Russians, or if I were the Chinese, if I were Xi Jinping and the Politburo, and I were looking at the United States over the last 6 to 8 months, I wouldn't be looking at how do my Facebook ads shift the election for Donald Trump. I would be looking at the fact that in the last 6 to 8 months, because of the lockdown and because of the COVID stuff, and because of the social division that already existed in the United States, the only thing that really needed to kick off basically a national uprising in which we had over 700 violent riots, several $1 billion of property damage, and I think over 50 people killed at this point, was one video of, albeit a very shocking video, but one video coming out showing an altercation between an individual and a law enforcement officer. And the story that emerged, the narrative that emerged as a result of those events, kicked off one of some of the greatest riots we've seen almost in 100 years. If I were the Russians or the Chinese, I would be saying, wow. And that wasn't the Russians or the Chinese that did that. But if I were, the FSB, or if I were, the Chinese Secret Security Service, I'd be looking at that and saying, that's money. That right there, the domestic division that already exists naturally in the United States is something that all we need to do is throw a match on, and we can basically create an oil explosion with it. So, and that's not going away until you find a way of addressing the actual issues that people in the middle and working classes are bringing up. And it has to be a genuine address. It has to be something that's legitimate. It can't just be we're going to recolonize the microphone so that there's only one legitimate voice emerging out of American politics, which is the sort of thing that you see coming from the left side, particularly ever in the last 2 weeks, ever since they thought that Joe Biden had gotten into office. It's we're going to ban everybody who doesn't think like us off the internet. That's not a solution. We need a genuine coalition to deal with these issues. It needs to be, if you want to deal with the foreign policy stuff, you have to deal with the domestic policy stuff. That, to me, is priority one.
Okay. Thank you, Outrimer, for coming on. I know you weren't on here for too long. We'd love to have you on a little earlier, especially to sort of carve out the dynamic with the other guy, because we had some serious hawks on here earlier. I know what was his name? Machiavellian was going hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you guys, Castley, you and him you guys were having a bit of a love affair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he's a friend of mine. He's nuke pilled too. Like he wrote an article on why a preemptive nuclear strike against North Korea is the only resort left. And I, of course, the debate recently arguing the same thing against one of these peaceniks on the left, BLM guy. So, you know, we see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. He's a bit more, I would say, less idealistic than
More
I am.
pragmatic. Yeah.
Yeah. We're both nuke pilled though. So.
All right.
I have my own reason as to why North Korea is being as ruthless as it is.
On that note, take it away, Castley. Your final thoughts.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on, Politicrat. It was
No
an
problem.
interesting evening. And I'll say, you know, you're welcome on my channel at some point in the future. I do
Thanks.
panels. I actually, for those of you who don't know, I'm the host of Superpower Broadcasting. We're, you know, I'd be willing to wager the largest independent neocon channel on YouTube at this point. And here's the thing. We do daily streams, oftentimes featuring panels. We cover issues from you know, politics and economics, but mostly focused on foreign policy issues and national security and international relations. And, you know, with big focus on nuclear threats coming out of Iran and North Korea. You know, to Outremer kind of closed on the idea that he can't really focus that much on foreign policy if you don't, you know, get serious about domestic policy. And I would retort by saying, you know, well, if we're going to put foreign policy on the back burner, our enemies are going to run roughshod over us and seize Eurasia, which is, of course, the seat of power in the world. And they would render us in North America to a desolate, irrelevant, powerless, moon, essentially orbiting the great wealth of Eurasia, and that's unacceptable. And so I'm going to say here, you know, for me, in terms of my perspective on everything, in terms of my studying and all of that, it's very clear to me that we need leaders that are able to look above the fray of the day-to-day issues facing, you know, people around here. They need to be representative of the working people, but they also need to be able to see beyond just the day-to-day fray of how am I going to pay the bills and that kind of stuff, and look forward so that we can address problems over there before they become problems over here. And I'll say this, I also agree that just putting the domestic issue just on the back burner, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that. It's been very clear that, as I've seen it, as my supporters have by and large seen it, some of my biggest patrons have seen it, that we have our disagreements with folks such as Tucker Carlson and President Trump, but their economic rhetoric and their focus on protectionism, especially against the enemies of America, is something that we need to adopt and we need to get serious on. And it's something that we need a cohesive strategy in Canada and America, in the United Kingdom. We need to bring back our manufacturing base, for example, and we need to make sure that all essential products and military components are produced here. Additionally, I'll say this, you know, one thing that Outremer had talked about was that, you know, the right needs a coalition to rival the left. Oftentimes people talk about how the left eats its own and how the progressives and the moderates always fight each other.
Instead of the conservatives.
But Outremer does have a good point at the end of the day, which is that if we can step back from that simple narrative, we can see that, and it's kind of true, despite what people like Vosh, neckbeards like Vosh would argue and try to distinguish themselves. The big tech companies like Facebook and others are basically, if not directly, they are in sympathy working with the radical progressive gremlins. And the thing is, for me, I'm going to have that coalition. I think the neoconservative renaissance, as it emerges post 2024, you know, after Biden gets his one term and there's a reset and the Republican Party gets to rebrand and we get strong leaders in the Republican
somebody
Party.
like Nikki Haley? Is that?
I think Nikki Haley, I'll say this, Nikki Haley is somebody who could bring along the domestic agenda of the more paleoconservative or almost neo-reactionary side of things, and couple that with the military strength and the absolutely pilled and I'll say clairvoyant and just overall wise approach of dealing with threats over there before they become threats on the border here. If we had a deal, if we could broker a deal where the domestic policy was basically, we basically give that to more outreamer type people, and the foreign policy is managed by those who focus more on foreign policy. We could have a really potent. That could be like Reagan 2.0. That would be a 2-term presidency. That would be a presidency that would be the overshining legacy of the 21st century and would solidify America and the Western order as the top dog on the world stage, and we would push back the forces of darkness in Eurasia. We would extinguish the scourges of communism. We would deal with North Korea. We would wipe out Duginism. That's right. We'd wipe out the Duginist agenda. We would balkanize Russia, and we would do it in such a way that at the end of the day, we can do that economically on those two big countries. We don't need a war with them, but Iran and North Korea require a war. We would essentially have the world at that point. And with the world under hegemony of Washington, it would be so easy at that point to then put the military not on the back burner, but not focus on it so much, such that now the domestic issues really do come to the fray. And you can say, well, what's the point if there's domestic chaos and everything going on right now? I would say one of the things that would be good about that coalition is that for all of the criticisms and whatnot that you could make against the progressives and everything and whatnot, it is true that they do have a deal of power that's disproportionate to their actual effect. I mean, Biden cowers to them, even though he doesn't need to. He beat Bernie in every county in Florida, yet he still appeals to them. He still appeases them, I should say. And I think, you can talk about how neocons are fewer in number than, say, for example, some of the paleocons, though that's somewhat debatable. At the end of the day, the neocons do possess the knowledge and the understanding of the foreign policy interests, such that, if we just focus and bunker down and have this, we're just going to do domestic stuff and everything, then you're essentially at that point, you're sticking your head in the sand and saying, I can't see the terrorists, therefore the terrorists can't see me. I can't see the Chinese, therefore the Chinese can't see me. I can't see the Russians because my head's in the sand, therefore Putin can't see me. That is the object permanence of a 3-year-old or younger. We need to be able to deal with the existential threats facing our civilization, while at the same time, I agree, we do need to sort out some of the problems that we have here at home as well. And I think that an economic protectionist angle with more free market principles on a domestic level, coupled with a coalition where, even if we're going to disagree on stuff like abortion or whatever, we give people like Outreamer the domestic angle, and people like me can handle the foreign policy stuff. That's a recipe for building a civilization that will endure.
I'll handle the metaphysics.
Yeah, that's a recipe for solidifying and consolidating and promoting a civilization that will endure for all time. That's what I'll say. So thank you for having me on tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for coming on. I think this was a fantastic discussion. This was also, out of all of the streams, had the highest viewership at one point. We got up to 22 people at our highest.
That's good. That's
that
usually 130 subs. That's good. I'm usually at 22, and I've got like almost 400. That's good.
Yeah. So I'm at 130. I'm at 135 subs as of this stream. So 3 people subscribed. But again, I'd just like to remind everyone who's still watching, if I get 220 subscribers by the 17th of December, I will personally donate 12 children's books to a literacy council for underprivileged children. And if I get 300 subs by December 31st, I will make a video about Shrek. And then I may even make another one. I may even, just for the sake of my channel, binge the show Corey in the House and do a political analysis of it. Who knows?
Everybody, go subscribe to my channel, Superpower Broadcasting, if you haven't done so yet. You can also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Castley. So, gotta throw in those plugs there.
Yeah, just pimp yourself out, man.
Yeah, I did that already, but
yeah, Aristocratic Owl. You still? Did you leave Twitter? I forget.
I don't have Twitter anymore.
And Outremer,
no offense, but Twitter is a garbage platform, and
yes.
Oh
Yep.
no, we all agree on that.
I agree.
yeah,
We should what? So
That's
should we
why
all should we all move to Parlor?
Well, no, somebody needs to call the aggressive gremlins on Twitter and the Brainlet Brigade. So somebody's got to do it. That's why I'm there.
guys, I would like to point out that
Well,
it is getting late though.
Yep. No,
well,
that's
we're almost
we're
at the
ending.
3-hour mark.
Yep. We're going already. And Outremer, just want to say one more thing. Looks like that you have some fans here already requesting that you start a YouTube channel.
What, in the chat?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I'll tell you. I'll see. I've got limited internet connection where I am right now, so I can't watch the YouTube stream. But I'll go back and take a look through some of this stuff. And that's been a common request, is that people in some of the servers I've been saying have been saying I need to either start a podcast or a channel. I'm considering it. I'll say that much. It's just, working 3 jobs and all that sort of stuff is.
Yeah.
I've been pretty slammed up.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, anyway, again, thank you
go.
everybody for coming on, especially you, Kevin. I know we've been trying to coordinate this for a while. Time that works for both of us. But yeah, I'd love to come on your show sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe talk about economics a bit. Maybe
For
even
sure.
debate realism and neoconservatism a little.
No, for sure. I got to say, it was actually pretty pleasant tonight. I thought, when you were saying like, oh, we're going to may have a reactionary and some anti-interventionists on, like Stratty earlier. I thought it was on, like, it got heated for a little bit. I thought it was going to be way more intensely heated. But Stratty and I, we
yeah, I was surprised too. You guys agreed on like a number of things, especially when you get to talking about economics.
Oh, no, for sure. But even without Reamer here, like we have different sort of sensibilities and different sort of visions and everything for the world. But, like I said, I think it was a pleasant conversation. And, I think if my camp can make a deal with your camp and we get a presidency like that's fair. That would be something to rival, if not Trump Reagan in terms of legacy. So
Maybe I was thinking if Tom Cotton sounds like the type of person you're referring to, but I could be wrong.
Well, no, Tom Cotton would be good. Haley would be good. Dan Crenshaw could be good.
I do like Crenshaw personally.
I really like Crenshaw. He absolutely owned Cassandra Fairbanks and a bunch of aggressive gremlins the other day on Twitter, and he went after Justin Amash, and he's like, dude, you guys know nothing about national security. You're like
I do quite like Amash though too personally, but that's a discussion for a different time.
Fair enough. But I gotta say, it was a lot more cordial. And it was pretty pleasant to be here and everything. And it didn't just turn into a bunch of ad hominems. And
if you want one of those, you need to go back and watch the Great Democracy Debate, which is I think 2 episodes ago, where I was Outremer and LSP. LSP?
Is that
Liberal Sanity Project?
I never really paid much attention to Liberal Sanity Project, so I don't really know too much.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're still technically live.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so thank you everybody for tuning in. I think this was a great episode. Again, subscribe to me, subscribe to Kevin, subscribe to Grayson. And I look forward to having all you guys on again sometime.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Let's get